Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 103.
Boy, talking about other things. Ben, do you know how long the longest surgery of all time lasted?
I'm guessing it's 103 somethings.
Well, pick your unit of measure here.
103 minutes.
103
hours.
minutes? That's not 103 minutes is not even 2 hours, man. Like, I think my wife has had surgery for longer.
103 hours? Are you for real?
103 hours.
Oh my
4
gosh.
straight days. So it was a surgery in 2001 that lasted 103 hours. A team of 20
Was it
doctors
like to separate Siamese twins or something?
Do you want to do my bit? Is that what this is? Do you just want to
is
take
that what
over
it
my
was?
whole numbers thing? Yes, that's exactly what it was. Why are you? Why?
I was trying to think, what
Why?
is the most complicated possible surgery you could do?
You know what?
I'm sure our listeners were too.
I've got like one shtick on this podcast, and like, and you're just gonna come in here and just take it away from me, just like that.
China shop.
Just pull the rug right out from underneath me, huh? Okay, reset. It's fine. Emotions down. New day. Hey, Ben, do you know what the longest surgery in the world was?
I'm guessing it's 103 somethings. Minutes doesn't seem right. I'm going to go with hours.
It was 103 hours. A team of 20 doctors at Singapore General Hospital worked in shifts to separate 11-month-old conjoined twins at the head. Here's the thing. They didn't expect it to go that long because all of their scans said, oh, yeah, we can cut here, cauterize this, it'll be fine. But when they actually got like the skulls peeled back and open and to separate the brains, they were intertwined, not just grown together, but like wrapped around each other in weird helixes. And so they had to track every one of like hundreds of tiny blood vessels to make sure, okay, which twin is this blood vessel going to? So they cauterize it in the right spot and then work as best they could to untwist the brain matter and then build on like graft on skulls where they didn't have skulls before.
Wow. Okay, so I got to know, did both twins live? Because that's the kind of thing, like, if you're going to take 4 days to do that, and at the end, if you failed, it doesn't seem like, I don't know.
So, do you know what's funny about the difference between you and me? I stopped reading. Like, I got all the details of the article. I'm like, oh, that's fascinating. Let me write that down for the podcast. I never entered my brain at all. Oh, I wonder if they lived. And this doesn't say, actually.
Wow. Okay, I have a personal story.
Oh, here it is. The operation was a success.
All right.
Oh, though one of them contracted meningitis several years afterwards and passed away. The other twin is now 15.
Several years is long enough to absolve the doctors of liability.
Yeah,
as far as I'm concerned.
It still sucks, but I mean, the operation was a success. They didn't die as a result of the operation.
Yeah, I wonder if that year or two of living apart was sufficient for the one to not regret it. You're like, oh, if only we just kept our heads joined together, she would still be alive.
I don't know. That's a good question because this happened when they were 11 months old, so they had no agency over the decision. But now one of the twins, the surviving twin, is 15 years old. I wonder what she feels about that.
Huh. So my younger sister used to get frequent kidney infections, and when she went in to get examined and diagnosed, they found out that she had like a small deformed third kidney. So she went in for an operation to have the third kidney removed, but kind of like you described with those brains, it was connected in ways they hadn't anticipated. And so when they cut the small extra one out, the regular one like stopped functioning.
Oh, fun. So she went in to have one kidney removed, and she ended up getting 2 kidneys removed.
So she went in with 3 and came out with 1.
That's that. All right, so I'm not going to bash on the medical profession. I don't know how complicated things are, but I can't help but think that a surgeon in that instance, like, okay, I can call in more surgeons. We could spend the next 103 hours working in shifts to try to unwind these things, or I can just remove her spare kidney and save everybody the hassle because she's already got one and she only needs one.
I think hassle is probably part of that equation. Maybe another part is also the fact that, like, for this particular bit of anatomy, it's somewhat optional.
That makes sense because, like, this wasn't life-threatening, right? Like, if I removed this entire... Like, I can either spin up all of this hospital's resources and then, like, take a ton of time and energy and just sheer medicalness away from a lot of other potential patients to unwind this totally unnecessary extra kidney. Now, with the conjoined twins, it was a little different because that was their brains. Like, okay, we're in this.
Right.
We're elbow deep into it, and we can't stop until we finish. And oh, by the way, if we don't do this right, they both die.
And I have to imagine expanding the length of a projected kidney surgery also has its own risks. Like, yeah, we could do this and try to save this organ, but it's optional technically in our biology, and extending the surgery another 8 hours, it means they're under sedation longer and there's fatigue and we can make a mistake, and it just introduces too much risk.
That's interesting. Like, how much paperwork do we sign for that? Because now I'm trying to remember, like, was your sister ever briefed, like, hey, by the way, if things reach a certain level of complication, the doctor's going to make a call and you're going to lose both kidneys?
I don't think so. And I don't think anyone got asked. I think you just came out and found out that's what happened.
So, all right, I'm having this internal debate because we want to be able to trust professionals, and we need to be able to put a lot of that
maybe
burden.
It's all the way at the bad end, like you said, where they just went, this is too much trouble. She doesn't need it. Cut it out.
Well, and this is why the medical profession needs to like administer itself, and there's licenses and medics and morality boards and that kind of thing because the doctor has this patient's life in the hand, and knowing that they can't put a giant 3-ring binder of like, okay, here's all the possible scenarios we can run into. Please check the box yes or no for the ones that you agree or disagree with. The doctor just has to make a call. And so you want that doctor to be, on the cutting edge, all up on their continuing education, and they know exactly what they're doing. Or they can be this guy that's like, man, I've got a tea time in like an hour and a half. You know what? We're taking a whole kidney. Nurse, get me some more scalpels.
This just got too complicated. Forget about it.
I'm out.
Yeah. Wow. Well, sometimes that could be an actual life and death decision, and this time you just had a, redundant organ.
Well, I'm glad she's okay, and I'm glad that they handled the redundant organ.
Yeah. Me too. I'm glad she's all right.
Did she get to keep it? They put it in a jar for her?
Well, I guess at that point, like, it's not viable as something. Surprised we had an extra kidney. But it doesn't work without this tiny weird one. Okay, well, we can't donate it to someone else. Throw it away.
Oh, by the way, we have an extra 1.2 kidneys.
Yeah. I got to follow up. So 2 episodes ago, I told you a story about how I accidentally emailed 3,000 people and then panicked and tried to recall the message.
So I just listened to that episode back, and I laughed just as hard listening back to it. Like, oh, Ben, you and your distro list. Yeah, that was really hilarious.
It's been 6 weeks, and this morning, Josh, I'm still getting those automated notifications of whether or not my recall succeeded.
Yep. Oh. I promise you, your last day at work, you will probably get at least one failed delivery notification.
Man, just constant reminders of how dumb I am. But in my new office, I now am the proud owner of my very own candy dish. And I want to posit that having a candy dish in your office is the human equivalent of having a bird feeder.
Oh, okay.
Like, I'm in an office behind a closed door in a hallway, and normally people just pass by in the hallway. But when I put delicious candy in this candy dish, people that normally wouldn't come in stop in for a sec and take a piece and say something nice and leave. And I'm like, that was nice. I'm going to keep restocking that at my own expense because I like having birds stop by my bird feeder.
Dude, what's really funny is we put a bird feeder in our backyard about a month ago. And the way that these things shake out, it somehow has become my responsibility to keep refilling it. And so this is the side effect of having a bird feeder, Ben, is that there are birds in my backyard constantly, which means that there's bird poop in my backyard constantly. And they're also, like, the bird feeder is elevated, and so they'll, like, get up on it, and then, like, seeds will fall down. So then they go down to below it to try to get into that stuff. But it's in a border area, like, it's in gravel right next to my artificial grass. And so the birds are like digging the rocks out onto my artificial grass over my border. And so I'm constantly having to rake my rocks back in. So anyway, that's all so much detail to say the negative side effects of having a bird feeder is you have to deal with the mess and the filth that the birds present. And so what human filth have you experienced with your candy dish?
Yeah, so obviously no one's defecating, or occasionally someone spills some coffee in the carpet that I'm going to have to clean up. That's happened 2 or 3 times, but that's because of the coffee machine, not because of the candy. I would say probably the biggest negative side effect is occasionally I just need to carry on uninterrupted and people will stop in and want to chat, and I just have to stop and allow the interruption. I guess maybe I wish I had a button on my desk where I could just push it and it would hide the candy dish.
You just need a big opaque cover, like one of those cake pan covers over it.
Candy dish closed. Don't come in right now.
There you go. Or maybe like a bear trap. Just set the bear trap open on the candy dish.
It's just one of the realities of life as an exec that sometimes you're going to need to get stuff done, but you're going to get interrupted no matter what. The phone's going to ring. People are going to come in. Stuff's going to happen. You just got to be able to prioritize and make stuff happen.
Yeah. Well, look at you being the productive and personable guy with the candy. Now, did you stock it exclusively with vanilla Tootsie Rolls?
No, you can't get those over here, although I have a feeling I might be getting some soon because a friend of mine sent me a photo of some of those with an open box that looked like it was about to be packed up as a care package. So
Aww.
if that box, but I don't know if I'm going to share them. But if they send me one of the mixed bags that it has 3 or 4 different flavors, like the red ones and the green ones and the orange ones and the vanilla ones, I'm going to pick out all the vanilla ones and put the rest in the candy dish.
Here's all the junk from my care package that I don't want.
Yeah, the birds will eat it. A long time ago, I can't remember how long it's been, Reddit reopened r/place. The word place is simply the idea that you go on this giant canvas and you can place a single pixel and then it locks your account for a while. And the first time it happened, it was this weird cultural phenomenon that was unique to the internet. I can't think of anything like it in the history of ever. And then it disappeared and was gone for like 6 years, and then it happened last year again. Well, it's been a year and it's happening again. It just opened up this last week. Have you noticed?
I did notice, yeah, and I've gone on and looked at the canvas a couple of times, and I'm seeing a bunch of negative comments about it this time around.
Maybe it's too soon.
Well, I'm seeing they've done something on the back end. Like I've done zero research into it, Ben, but like people are complaining that the admins have all the control somehow, and that they're not locking out the bots. And so somebody was complaining because like when they turned our place on, it was like within the first couple of minutes, like an entire bar from one side of the canvas to the other, tens of thousands of pixels, was the German flag.
Right. And so then the French did the same thing down the side, since their flag goes top to bottom and it's striped down that side.
And people are conjecturing, like, there is no way everyone was ready for this. This has to be bots.
It probably is. I mean, people queued up their bots from last time where they got all that practice. They were fresh and ready to go.
Yeah, and if you don't take any steps to prevent that from happening, then it's going to happen.
I'm interested in all the parts of this, even the chaos that comes from the fact that people are designing bots for it. The only scenario in which I would just utterly and entirely lose interest is if the bots were so effective and so pervasive that it just became homogenous and unchanging. Then I'd get bored and lose interest.
Yeah.
But the fact that there's this tension and these battles happening is its own interesting little microcosm of society and the internet.
It makes me think about graffiti out in the world, because it feels like there are some areas in urban areas where it's just, this wall is basically up for grabs. No one's going to complain if you go and put some street art on it. And again, this is something I'm thinking at the top of my head, and I've done no research, but I'm interested in spaces like that where it's clearly visible, clearly public space, and clearly like people draw art on it and nobody cares. How much of the time is that covered in like criminal writings? Like, is it like gang tags for marking territory or openly racist or hate speech, versus how often is it just really well done street art that people respect as they walk past it?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of equivalents of what you just described on the internet. Some of the kind of things that people do that might be considered abuse under other circumstances are simply allowed because humans don't object to it. I have a great example. I was on an internet forum, and there was a post that had a link in it that I would normally just ignore because it was obviously spam. But then right below it, someone had posted and said, hey, this is a known bot account that posts these spam links that are potentially dangerous. So if 5 of you will join me in clicking on it, clicking report, and click these 2 sub things, it will exceed the threshold that alerts the auto moderators, and this account will get suspended. And I thought that was a really interesting kind of like organized vigilante justice of the humans against the machines.
Hey, There's a robot. Let's get him.
Yeah. And not only that, but here's exactly what we need to do to get him.
Well, and that's just smart on the person that put it up there, because you can't just say, oh, we all need to report this and then it'll go away. You need to make it as the barrier to entry needs to be almost zero to get anybody to do anything on the internet.
So I did exactly what that person asked. It was such a clear call to action and so easy to do. And I was like, I can do that.
There's a lot of weird things. Like, people are weird. You people, listeners right now, you're weird. Stop it. But like the entire concept of Wikipedia should not exist. Like, it doesn't make any sense. The internet is teeming with all these people that are just hate each other and then just want to tear each other down. But then at the same time, it's also the largest repository of free human information that ever existed.
I love that you brought up Wikipedia. I don't think I've ever had a chance to go on a Wikipedia rant, so I want to, Josh.
Oh, no.
So
what did I just do?
Early in the history of the internet, some visionary, I don't know who and I should, but some visionary had this idea of like, we need to turn the model of how information is shared on its head. And initially there was this really strong backlash from traditional academics against the idea of Wikipedia. A open source, free to edit online encyclopedia that anyone can contribute to. And doing that, democratizing it and making the barrier to entry very low, allowed it to be effective in ways that traditional peer-reviewed, controlled source ways cannot, and solve a lot of the problems that things like traditional encyclopedias had. One is they become a bottleneck and information can't flow fast enough. And with something like the idea of let's make a repository that has everything about everything, you can't do that with a traditional model.
Yeah. I went to college in the early 2000s, and I still remember writing papers and like the professors insisting.
And getting the Wikipedia lecture from your teachers.
Yeah. Like they're insisting you need to have 10 sources for this paper, and not one of them can be an internet source because you can't trust what's on the internet. I'm like, how old are you, man? Like, what,
yeah.
you want me to go to the library and dig up a book that was written in 1963 and you trust that more than the stuff that's on the internet?
I have it's been long enough in the existence of Wikipedia, the idea of open source, anyone can contribute kind of information sources, that I have yet to meet a person that's such an idealistic purist that they don't use it in some way.
Yeah. I use Wikipedia when I'm looking for information and resources and trying to research things. Now, I will say this. Anything that's essentially nonfiction, I take with a grain of salt. I take Wikipedia as a starting point. Like, here's the cited sources. Okay, I'm going to go to those and look at what these are. But anything to do with pop culture, Wikipedia is the place, and it might as well be the gospel, because right? I have anybody that's passionate enough to sit there and write a 46-page dissertation about My Little Pony, like, and there's going to be an entire community of fans that are going to pick that to pieces like a murder of crows, and it's going to be absolutely flawlessly perfect because the things that we obsess about are very weird.
Yeah, it's great. Like you said, I remember I used to have this problem where, especially when I was a full-time missionary, we weren't allowed to watch TV or listen to radio or something, and there would be this initial wave of something new happened in the news, in society, in geopolitics, and in the initial wave you would find out what it is, and then after that the updates were just kind of telling you a little bit about it without going back and telling you what happened. And when you come in late into that cycle, sometimes you have no idea what's going on, and there was no way to find out. But with the introduction of Wikipedia, I could always find out what the thing was. I could just go somewhere I knew I could count on to catch me up to whatever it was.
It's like the world is a reality show, and you just stopped watching for a couple years.
Yeah.
Don't say yeah. That's ridiculous. What did you were just that entire time you were completely removed from the mortal existence, and you were a higher being, like trying to bring the gospel out to people? Is that what this was?
I think we've talked about this before. There was a few things, like for instance, while I was out, the Olympics happened in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. Like, I didn't miss the fact that like Carrie Strug won a gold medal on a broken ankle, or that someone bombed the Olympic Plaza, or I didn't miss the finale of Seinfeld. Like I was still getting the peaks, but nothing there. It had to be a pretty high level to raise into my threshold.
Nobody missed the finale of Seinfeld.
Right. Did you get an email from YouTube saying that they're increasing the price of YouTube Premium?
Yes, that I just saw that yesterday. It's like, oh, and it's this giant long email to be like, hey, we're charging you $2 more. And I saw that and I'm just like, yeah, inflation's been ridiculous. Of course you're raising your price by $2.
Yeah, I kind of saw that too. And I was like, do I care about a 17% price hike on something that I find to be pretty valuable?
You can't phrase in that
I'm
way.
okay with it.
Listen, I'm an accountant. You can't get away with stuff like that because people love to throw these percentages out like, oh, this is a 17% tax or increase. Like, yes, that's technically correct, but it's also $2. There are different thresholds for what is relevant, and people like to pick the one that is the most audacious. And you just did it on purpose. Like, you took the statistic and you said, oh, it's a 17% increase now. Yes, but it's also a $2 increase. And when you phrase it that way, like, one sounds ridiculous and the other sounds like, oh, well, okay, whatever.
Yeah. What was it? Doctor Who joke? They're like, is 4 a lot? Dollars? No. Murders? Yes.
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly what I was saying.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I want to tell you about something that completely different. So over here, the commercial support that exists to the military provides a few luxuries that we could get in the States just to kind of make us feel like we're at home. And one is that they go to great lengths to make sure that whatever local theater they've set up on the camp that we're at shows first run movies so we can go out and catch the latest movies like somebody back home. So this weekend is the opening of Barbie and Oppenheimer. And for some reason, they were both showing on Friday night, Barbie first, then Oppenheimer second. And so I was like, Barbie's showing late enough that I can like catch it after work, and then I'll just stick around and watch Oppenheimer. And I thought, man, that's going to be weird. And I thought maybe I was alone. And then one of my friends posted on Facebook that he was going to do it, and he wasn't sure if that was the right order to watch them in, but he was calling it the Barbenheimer Challenge.
Oh. I love this. I would be so in for the Barbenheimer Challenge.
Josh, it was like brushing your teeth and then drinking a glass of orange juice.
Yeah, the tone shift there would give you whiplash, I bet.
Oh, man, it was crazy. Okay, but first of all, they're both fine. Like, neither one of them was an objectionable experience at the movies, but they're very, very different kinds of things. Like, one is this very serious, self-assured, historical perspective that kind of takes... It was right along the lines of, like, Oliver Stone's JFK. We're, like, examining a cultural touchstone that's a controversial incident and examining controversial perspectives, and wow.
Do it. And then the other one was Oppenheimer.
Yes!
I was sitting here like, oh, he has to do it. He has to make this joke.
Yeah, and then the other one was Oppenheimer. Okay, so in that respect, they both did that kind of... They both were like... Barbie, while it was kind of like this candy-colored romp through fantasy land with toys and people doing absurd, silly things, it was also a really serious look about our relationship with our toys and fantasies and the influence of big corporations and our ideas about gender roles in society.
Not expecting that from the Barbie movie, but now I'm excited to see it.
Yeah. It was intense. If you just go expecting to have a silly, funny time, you will. If you go and you're looking at like when we were playing with toys as children and imagining that they were living lives and having accomplishments and stuff, and how does that affect me, what I've become as an adult, that's there too. It was really interesting.
Okay, so I'm not going to lie, Ben. Like, we're probably going to see the Barbie movie because, like I said, we're just on a movie kick this summer. But I'm going there with the only expectation I have is I want Ryan Gosling to be a ridiculous caricature the entire time. That's the only thing that I want.
You will not be disappointed, my friend.
Excellent. That's fantastic.
Oppenheimer. So for those that don't know, Robert Oppenheimer was a physicist that was early influential in the like late 20s and early 30s in trying to develop the ideas surrounding nuclear physics in the United States of America, and was ultimately chosen to lead the Manhattan Project and develop America's first nuclear weapons that were used in World War II. The only nuclear weapons that have ever been used against humans in the history of nuclear weapons. And apparently, after he invented it and realized that he'd lost control of it, and the military were the ones that and the politicians were the ones that decided when and how it got used, he became a very active opponent of the idea of further development of nuclear weapons. And because of that, and because of some embarrassment that caused a few political figures, there was a very public and very concerted effort to embarrass him, take away all his credentials, and isolate him so that he didn't have any further influence. And the movie mostly focused around this kangaroo court that was held where his security clearance was revoked.
Interesting. Okay. Because I love everything about the Manhattan Project just because they put so many smart people in such a small space. There are a ton of really interesting stories that came out of that. Like, I think that's where the Fermi paradox was developed and one of the lunch tables during the Manhattan Project. They talk
about that.
There was a mathematician, and I don't remember the name of this mathematician, but he classically figured out that the locks that the military were using on their filing cabinets had a very slight flaw in that you could be one number off either direction, it would still trip. And so based on that, he could, if you forgot the combination of these locks, instead of having to have the military come out and drill it and get you a new one in like a week, he could usually crack the code in like an hour.
With just using math?
Using math. And he figured out the perfect algorithm to this flaw in the lock, and I can do it this way, and then I can figure it out in like an hour.
That was not in the movie. But this is two movies. One movie is the movie you were hoping for. That's about an hour. This is a 3-hour movie. About an hour worth of it is just the execution of the Manhattan Project resulting in the Trinity test. That's about an hour's worth of runtime. The other 2 hours is the trial. And yeah, you can make a whole other movie. Oh.
Now you've kind of soured me that expectation. I wanted the whole thing to be math and engineering.
Nah, only about 30%. It's still good. It's going to be the movie that's all the buzz in the Oscars in January.
Of course it is. It's an Oscar bait movie. That makes all the sense. All right, tangent. One of the most interesting things I've seen about the Oppenheimer movie is the reel of the IMAX film. Have you seen that? Like what they have to plug into the IMAX machine to actually show this film on a projector?
No, but I'm going to look it up. Link in the show notes.
Yes. So they were some art student on TikTok, of course, did a comparison like, oh, this is 35 millimeter film, and this is this millimeter film, and here's the pluses and minuses, and like this is one frame of an IMAX, and it was like 10 times the size of any of the other things. And it was very rich and deep, and it had all the sound encoded onto it. But then she showed the picture of the reel of the Oppenheimer movie, and it's like 13 feet across or something. Like, it's enormous.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I'm definitely looking that up. One curious thing about watching movies in our theater is in order to copy protect them, and because they're kind of putting them into untrusted distribution channels, is that they send them to the military on VHS still.
Wow, really?
Yes. So they come to our theaters and they're kind of on a suboptimal screen with a suboptimal sound system, and the player in the back is a VHS player. I kid you not.
Well, I mean, nothing will outlast the longevity of magnetic tape.
And it's this interesting curiosity of technology where, like, we invented something that was good enough a long time ago, and we moved on from it for good reasons, but there's also reasons to hang on to the things from the past. Just like if you have, I don't know, a cache workstation that's still functioning fine, why replace it? Just keep using it.
It's funny you bring that up. I just saw a video the other day. Apparently one of IBM's newest products, one of IBM's latest enterprise long-term archival storage products is now magnetic tape again. And
what?
Yeah, they're apparently...
So are they just having new advances in that arena?
In the technology, like the media is still the same. It's still magnetic tape, but apparently they're changing the control systems and the algorithms that they use to store it on. But they're saying that over hard drives, over solid state drives, which are still expensive for the storage, it is the cheapest and therefore most efficient way to store vast quantities of archival data is now on magnetic tape again.
Wow. So that Star Wars movie, what was the one where they were trying to get the plans for the Death Star?
Rogue One.
Yeah, Rogue One. So that scene in Rogue One where they go into the room where they've got mechanical machines storing media we actually are headed there.
No, except the magnetic tape reels are way bigger than that. Like a magnetic tape reel is like 3 feet by 3 feet. Like what they were pulling out of the wall in Rogue One was like a hard drive. Yeah, but the hard drives, they're mechanical and they have failures, and then they have to go through hoops to get the data off it. And so IBM's just like, you know what? What's better than having all these complicated moving parts that break down? Giant reel of magnetic tape.
All right, Josh, a week ago, on the 16th of July, 2023, was the men's final in the Wimbledon Tennis Championship that happens in Wimbledon, England. I normally wouldn't talk about this kind of thing, but other than there's a story I want to tell you that happened. So the final was between Novak Djokovic and Carlos Alcaraz, the number 1 and number 2 ranked players in the world. And it was epic. It was 5 hours of thrilling tennis. Ultimately, Djokovic lost, and a lot of significant things happened. Like, Alcaraz is 20 years old. Djokovic is 36. This would have been Djokovic's 24th major victory, which would have been the most all time. But because Alcaraz won, he didn't get it. So is he going to keep trying, or is he going to retire? Who knows? He'd won Wimbledon the last 4 years in a row. So for the fact that this young guy kind of dethroned him is also significant. And you and I have talked in this podcast in the past about how, like, baseball is unique in that all the parks are different shapes. Tennis is interesting in that the dimensions of the court are very exact, down to like the centimeter. However, the 4 majors are played on 3 different surfaces that have very different properties for how the ball ricochets.
My wife was a tennis player in high school, and she's a big tennis buff, and so we still watch tennis occasionally on the TV. And we watched the first part of the Alcaraz Dvorak match.
Okay.
I can't say the guy's name. Djokovic match.
Wimbledon is the only tennis major that's played on grass courts. And so it's kind of fascinating that it carries this tradition back to the origins of tennis in early medieval England and France or wherever. I don't know enough about that to give a history lesson on it. But they also have very strict traditions about, like, the fact that they require the players to wear all white. It's the only event that has a dress code like that. And the whole thing kind of has this mythos surrounding it. So much of a mythos that while I was in England for 3 years, I did a little bit of research to find out if it was possible for me to be able to go to Wimbledon during the 2 weeks of this major tennis tournament when it was going on while I was there.
Oh, no, you need season tickets booked well in advance. Only rich people go to these things.
That was my thought. And I mentioned to one of my British friends, and they said, now hold on, let me tell you something. And they explained to me that in this kind of backlash against this idea of only the nobles get to do things, at Wimbledon, they set up this democratic system of sorts where they withhold every day 500 tickets and fix the price on them at a very low amount and don't make them available to the general public. And the only way you can get them is by being there in person.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
So I said, well, what's the catch? And they said, well, because of that, it creates this demand problem. And so people queue up so far in advance that, it's hard to get in. I said, so what did they do? They said, well, there's this park across the street outside of the grounds of Wimbledon where they allow you to camp, and you queue up your tents in the line so that you sleep overnight and then wake up first thing in the morning, clean up your tent, and then where you were in the tent line is where you are in the line to get tickets for Wimbledon that day.
I love everything about this. I love the lining up. I love the queuing overnight. I love the professional attitude that they have where, oh, go ahead and clean up your tent. I know I'm in line after you. I will wait. Respect the lines, people.
So this whole idea captured my imagination so perfectly that I went to my wife and I said, honey, we've got to do this. Like, let's find somebody to watch the kids. We'll
of
get
course
a tent.
You did. Of course you sat in a tent outside of Wimbledon and, like, queued up. Of course you did.
Let's go have this quintessential British experience and go to this storied, historic major tennis tournament. And because I also happen to be a bit of a geek for really adoring this Venus and Serena Williams, who were playing in Wimbledon that year, I picked a day when we'd be able to go and see Venus or Serena play. So we packed up a backpack, got our tent, got everything we needed ready, the right clothes to wear and all that kind of stuff, and went to Wimbledon and got there. And it was just like they said, except that so many people had queued up that I think our place in line was like 527th or something like that.
You didn't get there early enough.
No, I think only the first 200 tickets go to center court, and then after that you can pick anything else you want. But the center court tickets are exhausted. I think we're like 250th in line.
Okay.
So because we didn't get there early enough, we weren't able to get tickets to center court, so I wasn't able to see Serena Williams play.
Oh.
However, we were still able to get, I think, like 50 pounds each, which is really cheap, and get into the grounds and then go to any match that we wanted. And there's a lot of other courts that aren't as storied and beautiful and magnificent as Center Court, but we still had this great experience. So we slept overnight in the park, got up, got our tickets, went in. All that was very low stress, surprisingly. It's not like waiting in line outside an Apple store to get the newest iPhone where you're like sleeping on concrete.
I love the imagery of, I'm going to look for this now whenever I see like the crowd at Wimbledon. I love the idea of like royalty and like rich people and like pop stars and like all of these celebrities sitting next to dirty, grimy, unshowered
200 rando people that slept in the park.
Oh yeah, I've been homeless for the last 48 hours. I'm sitting next to
it's a contest. When you see them in the audience in Center Court, be like, that guy slept in the park last night. You could tell.
That's awesome.
Okay, so we get in, and the traditional food of Wimbledon is strawberries and cream. So I went to the gift store, got a souvenir. We had strawberries and cream. And outside of Center Court, you've seen it if you've watched the coverage, there's this giant steep hill that almost functions like a stadium. And on the outside of the tennis stadium, they have the giant screen TV where you can sit and watch the match that's happening inside of Center Court. And you can cheer along with them. But because it's shown on TV, there's almost like this delayed sound of the people outside the stadium cheering from the ones inside.
Yes.
So if you can also listen for that on the coverage. If there's a really exciting play that happens, you'll hear this delayed sound of the cheering from outside the court. So 2 thumbs up. Excellent experience. Would recommend if you ever go to England during Wimbledon and you don't want to pay an arm and a leg to get good tickets, you can sleep in the park and get in for low cost.
That's a classic like travel thing. Like if you're going to vacation in Britain, like that's like something that you should do.
Yeah, it felt like this really interesting slice of society that wasn't just paying, $1,200 for a ticket and going in and watching a tennis match. It was like this whole cultural experience where I was part of this big group of people that were the real fans.
Are you listening, Ticketmaster? This is how you set up a ticketing program where people feel good about it and they didn't pay an arm and a leg. So, Ben, I actually have a bad at Magic for us. And the idea is I experienced something in Magic that I knew existed, but I never had experienced it myself. And I'm excited to share it with you.
Okay, go ahead. I'm intrigued.
Have you ever heard of Spelltable?
No.
No, it just the makes me think that you've heard of it, but you don't know. You just want to cue up the conversation.
There's a YouTube channel that's something like that. It's called like Spell Slingers or something like that, and it's just where like some celebrities that are famous from other games get together and play Magic and stream it.
Oh, you really haven't heard of Spelltable? Okay.
No, I don't know what you're talking about.
So Spelltable is a product that I think Wizards of the Coast put out, where you can train. Like you log into it, it's a website all in your browser. And it accesses your webcam and your microphone, and then you aim your webcam down at your playmat, and then you have paper cards and you play paper Magic, and then it's almost like a Zoom call or a video teleconference with other players that can join, and you get a video screen of their playmat, and you can see the cards that they're playing, and it's live voice chat, so you can sit there.
So this is a Magic version of Roll20.net?
Yes, this is. You can play paper Magic with people online, and I've seen it on the internet before where people would like record the Spelltable output.
Do it in an ad hoc kind of way, but you're talking about something formal that's designed purpose-built for this. It is
purpose-built for Magic Gathering, and I didn't know how robust it was until we experienced it yesterday. So last night, my son and I went to our local game store to play Commander, because that's what we do on Friday nights, right? And so we played a game of Commander. There was a new person that she sat down and we played, and we were teaching her some things, but she was pretty good and she was a lot of fun to play with. And she says, "Hey, do you mind if we play another game? I would really like my husband to play with us." I'm like, "Oh, sure, that's fine." And then she gets her laptop out and her cell phone and starts doing these things. I'm like, "So is he coming?" And she's like, "Oh no, he's in South Carolina, but we're just going to do it over Spelltable if that's okay."
So she said that like it was just common knowledge that this was a thing?
Well, she had done it before with him and some other people, so she had experience with this program. I say she had experience in that she used it before. It was clear that I knew more about it in the first 5 minutes once we got started. And so here's the thing: what happened is she starts setting up, and then she opened up her laptop, and she started the Spelltable instantiation on the laptop. And then she sent a link to herself on her phone. And then she clicked the link on her phone, and then the phone logged in on the website, and then the phone became her camera. And so she was one of the players on the spell table, was her phone, and she just got a little tripod and set her phone up over her playmat.
How long did all of this take in real time?
The setup took longer than it needed to because one, people weren't ready to actually do it, and two, there was some they were having some trouble figuring out how does this work? How does this work? But it's clear that if both parties knew how to use it and they were ready to fire it off, you could get it up and running in 5 minutes.
Wow.
Well, and here's the thing:
bright ideas like this live on a razor's edge, where if just one or two things take too long or are too awkward, that the whole thing will fail.
She, while she was setting it up and working with her husband to try to get him onto it, and they were having technical difficulties, and I go, "Hey, can you send me an invite, and I'll log on my phone? That way he can see what I'm doing. We don't have to move your phone around to show the other playmate." She goes, "Oh yeah, that'd be great." I had it up and running and fully set up in 5 seconds. Because it's it's a link. Oh, it's a Zoom call. Turn on my camera. Nope, switch it to the other side. Okay, great. Okay, I don't want to see everybody. I just want to see mine so I can see what's going on. Okay, perfect. Yeah, all the buttons were exactly where I expected them to be. All of the camera controls, all of the microphone controls.
It used Zoom?
It doesn't use Zoom. It's its own proprietary thing. But it's all free. It was all free. And I set my phone up on a tall deck box that I had, and it was aimed right down at my playmat, and it popped up on her screen on the laptop. I'm like, yeah, it was perfect. Everything's fine.
Wow. You didn't even need a mount rig or something?
Well, I've got a weird phone, and so that helped. Yeah. I just had a tall box, and I waited.
It has a low enough center of gravity that you can prop it over the edge. Yeah,
exactly. And so this whole thing was this is just a video call that people have decided to use for Magic. No, it isn't. Because it adds extra interface, just enough extra interface to make it perfect for Magic. For one, it has life counters associated with each player that only that player can control. And so I could click up and down on the little thing and show what my life total is, and that pops up for everybody on the spell table screen. Second, you can tell it the turn order, and you can tell it whose turn it is, and it will automatically focus. It'll go full screen on that player for their turn. So if you have multiple players, and if you have the turn order in there correctly, it'll constantly be showing where the action is. Third, and this is the thing that really sold it for me, was
the killer feature.
The killer feature was the optical character recognition, because at any time you could click on one of the cards that was on this camera randomly, and the program would recognize it as a card, search its optical database or whatever it did, and it would pop up the gatherer text, the image, and all of the rules text for that card on the side, so you could zoom in and read it and see everything.
That's awesome. Would it get, I don't know, a Japanese one?
Oh, no, but he just had, because it's on a web.
I know, I immediately went to the boundaries of what it's capable of doing, but...
Well, but he had a playmat, and he was playing cards, and they were, kicked off at a weird angle, and sometimes they had glare or whatever, but and they were kind of small because it's on a webcam. He's doing a 720p, but I can't see what this is. But if I didn't know what the card was, I could click on it, and it would give me the full, off to the side, I can still see what he's doing, but it would give me the exact card that it was and all the rules text for it.
Wow, that feels like it would cover the gap, like you said, of the fact that it's small and far away. Yes. I already have that problem in a game of Commander when there's 4 players playing, and I can't see the card to the guy's right-hand side at the other end of the table.
And this is probably why I enjoy Commander more than you, because I remember every Magic card that I've ever seen or read. And so it's easy for somebody to say, oh, I play this. And the person we were playing with actually looked at me funny.
There's a simulation of that happening in Josh's brain right now.
Well, and this is the thing is, so we had the laptop up with, and I told her, just full screen that to him so we can see what he's doing, and then we'll just put him in the turn order on the table. We moved the laptop to where he was in the turn order. And he would say, oh, I'm going to play this. I'm like, oh, crap, that's going to give all those guys indestructible and +1/+1. And everybody would look at me like, yeah, it does that. How did you know that? I'm like, do you all not know what the Night Lord does? I mean, come on. So, yeah, yes. So while Spelltable was great for everybody, I was able to, now I'm just bragging, but I was maintaining a virtual image of what the play state was.
Yeah. Huh. I wouldn't even consider to try this because of all the barriers that you mentioned, of just the difficulty of the quality of the image, the potential for glare, the lack of visibility, and problems with understanding, and all those things.
So here is my my proposal to you, sir, because I saw this and I'm like, this works way better than I thought it would. I want to do two things. One, I want to have an experiment with you. I want to do a one-on-one game of nonsense magic just to get the
That's
so
why
you
asked me if I had a magic deck here.
That's why I asked you if you had a magic deck there. I want to see if you can get it to work. And then second, this is going to solve our commander problem, sir. This is going to be like, you've got kids like spread to the four winds that have commander decks. I'm like, let's sit down and let's play a game of commander on Spelltable. There's no reason we can't do that. We've only ever played half a game of commander together.
I want you to try to imagine a game over this spelltable.net or whatever it is, .com, without the mental capacity of remembering every card and what they can do and from their position on the table.
On your computer, you have the option to set what the screen looks like, so you can focus on just whoever the active player is, or you can have all four tables shown at the same time, and whenever you click on a card that is in the visibility of the camera, the thing will tell you what that card is.
How is that possible?
Because
it's augmented reality.
Because it's tiny on your screen, it's still putting out whatever the full image that webcam is, and that's on the back end, and so they can recognize the card from its art or its name or whatever their magic they're doing, and it will tell you what the card does.
Okay, let me ask you this. Could I turn that on and not have a remote player and just have that functionality? Because sometimes I want that in a regular game of Commander. Like I have a laptop open next to me, and instead of asking that guy what that thing is and what it does, I could just click on it on my screen and find out.
If he had a camera over his play space, yeah, like you would, like his camera, like so what you're gonna, so you could log your camera in as the only player.
I don't want remote capability. I want augmented reality.
Just ask him to see the card, Ben.
No,
like he'll slide it over to you. You can
everybody's doing their thing. I just want to be like, oh, what was that again? And just click on it and see the gatherer text. Because usually in Commander, people have the foils with the foreign language and the old versions, and
you're playing nonsense. Like hardcore Commander players, man. Like all my decks cost like $80 or less.
I hate Commander.
No. You're doing the thing. This is like people that say I hate video games or I hate books or I hate wine. No, you haven't found one that you like. You had a bad experience, and that is you're anchoring on that. That's what you're doing here, sir.
All right. I'm willing to give this a try. I'll see what I can do. I don't have a good quality webcam here and any kind of rig that would hold up my phone or anything like that. There's some problems.
So log in your phone and your laptop together. Set the phone as just like no camera, just to view the play space, and then use your webcam to aim your laptop down at your play space or something. I don't know, man. There's technology. Like there's so many options. Like I don't know.
All right, I want to change the subject without changing the subject, and that is the fact that you told me that there's a thing that you can now do online that I wouldn't have imagined you could do online makes me wonder, what are the limits of the internet?
Of the internet.
I mean, obviously, as soon as the internet was invented, we figured out ways to have sex over it, and that's getting improved all the time. But now you say you can play Paper Magic: The Gathering on the internet? Like, what else do we do or like to do that I didn't think was possible over the internet that you can also do? Like, yeah, we played chess and poker over the internet a long time ago, but like... Okay, this reminds me of a book I read as a kid. It was called The Apprentice Adept by Piers Anthony. Did you ever read that series?
Yes, I did.
So there was a whole society built around this future scientific thing called the game, where they would go and it could be any competition of anything in life. And at one point, they also revealed that their futuristic sci-fi world is overlaid on top of a high fantasy world. And for some reason, they're trying to play the game between the denizens of the fantasy world and the denizens of the sci-fi world, and they figure out a magic apparatus on the fantasy side and a high-tech apparatus on the technology side so that they can play a match of ping pong against each other.
I'm over here reeling that you've read this series of really niche books that I read in middle school. That's crazy.
Yeah, and so this is that. Like, are we going to get to the point where that just reminded me, there's a YouTube channel where a guy who invents things, and he made a version where you could go online and play a simulated version of pool, but it had a robot that would execute what you told it to do, and so you would actually play on a real table, but he could be in the room playing against you, and you could be on the internet playing against him, and it worked almost seamlessly.
Yeah, that was the YouTube channel Stuff Made Here. Big plug for that guy. He makes
great
really
channel.
Cool, awesome
oh
things.
Man,
yeah.
Great videos.
And so he had a physical pool table, and you could play online, and his system would replicate your shots on the real table, and you could play them. You could play real pool with him.
But now I'm realizing there's no limits. Like you could do anything.
My favorite part of this whole conversation was when you said, yeah, the internet is great. Of course we figured out how to have sex on it. But you're telling me I can play games on the internet too? Mind-blowing.
No, not games. The kind of games you never thought you could play on the internet. Like, we're like, well, you can play paper magic in person, and you can play digital magic. But no one ever said, but can I play paper magic on the internet?
Can I play paper magic digitally? And the answer is yes, you can.
Wow.
Nerds will always find a way to hook up with other nerds without having to go out of their house, Ben. Like, this has been a thing for a long time now.
What are you reading right now, Josh?
Actually, Ben, right now I'm taking a break from the Dresden Files, and I'm reading Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez.
Oh, me too. And listeners, we'd like to invite you to read it with us, because on the next episode of Bad and Magic, that's the book we're going to discuss. Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez. Get ready to grapple with your assumptions about the world around you when it comes to understanding and appreciating the other half of humanity.
I will say this, because I want to say this now, and I will probably bring it back up in the book review, but I want to say it now because if anybody does want to join in the book, maybe they'll have the same experience that I did. So, like, my wife is a feminist, and I also believe in all the feminist ideals. I don't know if I would ever go picket for a feminist cause, but I'm right there with her, okay? I believe all these things. I believe that there is built-in bias into our systems that we've constructed.
That probably says more about what you think about the efficacy of picketing, but yes, agreed.
All right, we'll come back to that, I guess. But so here's the thing: is I'm going into this book already agreeing with her premise. Like, yes, I believe this exists. Please give me the meat and potatoes. I want all the details, all the examples. And something about, I couldn't put my finger on it, but something about the verbiage or her tonality, because it's read by the author, something about the way that she's conveying the information to me, I started to feel defensive. And like, there's a couple times early chapters I had to pause and like really like, why do I feel this? Why is she making me feel this way? I agree with all of her points. Why do I feel like I need to like defend myself right now? And I'm not sure what that was. I couldn't put my finger on it. You reading it a second time, maybe you can enlighten us then. But just listeners, be aware. Maybe you'll have the same experience. Maybe you won't. I'm not sure. But it's a good book, and she's not mean. She's not calling out the reader for being part of the problem. She's just doing her due diligence as an academic. But maybe this is my assumptions. Maybe she's challenging things in my brain I didn't realize were there. Maybe that's what it is.
Great. So listeners, if you want to have your ideas about gender norms and the importance of women in history and in society and in your life and in your language and in everything around us, join with us in reading this book. All right, for our main segment today, Josh, you and I promised last time that we would talk about all the Spider-Mans.
All the spider people.
Now, the very first thing we have to say is, like, in the most recent movie to come out, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, they reveal how deep the Spider-Verse actually is. And there's no way in heaven's name that even if we spent every episode for the next 100 episodes of Bad at Magic, we could touch on all of the Spider-Man. So immediately we need to kind of bound what we're going to talk about.
I love that. It's like, hey, we said we'd talk about all the Spider-Mans, but we're not talking about all the Spider-Mans.
Even if we said all the Spider-Man movies, we still got to put an asterisk on it, because in 1977, a Spider-Man movie came out that went to theaters, and they released 2 sequels that went straight to VHS. We're not going to talk about those. Oh boy, I can't think of his name. Tom Holland version of Spider-Man was first introduced in one of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where he was only a supporting character. And we'll mention those, but we're not going to talk about those 3 or 4 movies that were, Team Avengers style movies that had Spider-Man in them, but he wasn't the main character. We're going to constrain ourselves to 4 franchises. The 4 franchises are the Sam Raimi trilogy that came out in 2002, 2004, and 2007, Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3. The Mark Webb 2 films that maybe was going to be a third, Amazing Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man 2. The Home trilogy with Tom Holland as Spider-Man that came out in 2017, 2019, 2021. And the Spider-Verse soon-to-be trilogy that came out in 2018 this year, and hopefully the next one will come out next year.
I think they've already delayed it to late next year, but yeah.
Those 10 movies, 10 movies is what we're going to talk about today. So we're gonna explore them, their ideas, the production, where they fit. We're gonna rank them all, and then see where we differ in opinion. So how do you want to start?
Well, I was going to give a complete plot synopsis of each of the 10 movies so that way the listeners know where we're at. You're laughing like I'm not being serious. Ben, you be quiet for the next half hour. Go get a drink. Here we go, listeners. Buckle up.
Okay, you want to take them in chronological order?
I'm not doing that. All right, we're not doing the plot synopsis. Can we? Let's just talk. Yeah. I think chronological is the best. I think we can talk about the movies in general, our feelings upon like a second, third, or 18th viewing, and then maybe we can flow into after we've talked about all of them, our pluses and minuses for them all. Maybe then we can rank them kind of in order, and then talk about why we think some are better than the others.
All right. So let's go back to 2002.
2002. My first cinematic experience with Spider-Man. Like, I got to go to the movies. I got to watch. Now all I can think of is Tom Holland, but it's not Tom Holland. This is the actor's name,
Tobey Maguire. Were you still in high school at the time?
I was still in high school at the time. Yes, 2000. No, wait a minute. No, I wasn't. I graduated 2001 in high school, so I was in college when the first Spider-Man came out.
Was it in a military theater?
No, I didn't. I never. There was a military base at the academy that's co-located, but I never went there. I never went to like the base proper. I always like left and went out into the civilian world to go see stuff. And Spider-Man was, I mean, so it was good. I liked it. It was Spider-Man, right? It wasn't until all the other Spider-Men started coming out, and so we also rewatched a lot of the Spider movies in the last couple of weeks. And it wasn't until rewatching it now through the lens of, what good movies can be that I realized the 2002 Spider-Man isn't great.
Could you consider that might be a bit of presentism? I think
absolutely
it was groundbreaking in a way that it kind of opened up. You can go back and watch Citizen Kane, which is considered by most to be this landmark movie in cinematic history because it established things like flashbacks and complicated narratives and all those kinds of things. But to actually go back and watch it now, not great. It was important.
There's a scene in the middle of Citizen Kane where there is a cockatoo overlaid on the screen that does a loud caw and then disappears forever with no explanation. And the filmmaker has admitted that he put that in the movie because he thought people might be falling asleep at that point and he wanted to wake them up. His actual words.
Yeah, not great. But it was important. And I think the first Spider-Man movie is kind of like that. Like, we'd had some attempts in the past at comic book movies. And I think let's talk about that now because I want to talk about that for a minute. What was it that paved the way and led to the glory that is, the 20 some odd movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe up until recent? And I posit some people trace it back to Blade, which happened back in the mid-90s with Wesley Snipes. That was this comic book franchise that showed that it was possible to make exciting comic book movies with protagonists and interesting storylines and all those kinds of things. So you can make a case for Blade. You can also make a case for some other attempts like the Hulk movie made by Ang Lee, which wasn't great, or the X-Men franchise by Fox, which has been really uneven, with Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart. Yeah. But I posit, and while Iron Man was the first movie technically in the MCU franchise, I think this movie by Sam Raimi, Spider-Man, was the one that really paved the way.
So, if we're going to go with this, the historical perspective, I think all of the movies that you talked about, what they have in common was really solid comic book stories. Like, the plot already existed, the canon existed. It was a compelling story, and people realized that. And I think that's why the filmmakers gravitated towards, this is a prepackaged plot, start to finish, with costume design, set design. It's all here. This is a movie in a box, just add filmmaking. And I think that's the problem. I think what we're seeing is a struggle for filmmakers to adapt their source material into a film. Because there's one thing to tell an epic story and a plot over the course of, 80 comic books where you have all of this time to develop all the aspects of it and explore every little nuance and character detail, versus I've got an hour and a half to 2 hours to tell a story that in a compelling way that audiences will walk away satisfied.
Interesting. I'm thinking about that now because some of the examples I gave were people that had a long history of filmmaking and then did a comic book movie. Ang Lee's a great example.
Ang Lee famously declared that he had never read a comic book, but I can totally turn this comic book into a movie, and it failed spectacularly because...
Yeah, and it had a few panels where it showed like frames around the images and stuff like that, but it really was, it was weak fan service. It wasn't even fan service.
It was clear from the beginning that Ang Lee had no respect for what the source material did. Like, he saw like, oh, it's a comic book. No, it's a compelling story with characters, and you are not taking it seriously enough.
So that's where I think Sam Raimi was different. I think, yeah, he was a filmmaker and he was famous for his horror movies. And you could see more so in Spider-Man 2, but you could kind of see his roots as a horror filmmaker with his interesting visual camera angles and things that he does. But in casting Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin and in following through some of the just key core canon elements of what constitutes Spider-Man, you know, he makes snappy comebacks and quips, and you know, he has this downtrodden life, and everyone's a little bit larger than life in their expression of their emotions and the conflicts and those kind of things. I think he nailed all of that. It felt to me true to the spirit of the comic books I read as a kid.
That is definitely at the core of the Spider-Man character, and all of the good Spider-Man movies that we're going to talk about, the ones that I like the most are the ones that are most attached to that core conflict that exists in Spider-Man. Spider-Man's conflict is not with the supervillains. It's with himself as the superhero versus himself as Peter Parker. It's like trying to live this dual life. If that's what your story is focused on and how those intersect and how they conflict, most likely you're going to get a good review from me, because that's what I want Spider-Man to be.
Man versus himself.
Exactly. Yes.
There's also man versus man, and that's one of the compelling things about this particular movie, and that he had this adult mentor, because Peter had kind of been deprived of adult members through some tragedies in his past, that where he'd kind of keyed in on Norman Osborn as someone he'd want to emulate, be admired by, be respected for his scientific achievements, those kinds of things. And then when that relationship went sour, he had to rectify his feelings towards the adults in his life.
It's funny as you say that, but I saw that the other way around. I saw like Peter Parker had like his relationship with Uncle Ben, and that's really like the core memory for him. And then Willem Dafoe feels like he intersects with Peter's life, and every time he does, Willem Dafoe's like, man, I wish you were my son. You're so much better than my son. My son's such a POS over here. You should be more like Peter. I feel like Willem Dafoe adopted Peter Parker way more than Peter Parker adopted Willem Dafoe, to the extent that at one point it's like, Peter, I've been like a father to you. And I wanted Peter to go, whoa, whoa, whoa. You are like my friend's dad that I see
really
sometimes.
Overstating the case here.
I think you have miscategorized our relationship.
Okay, yeah. Well, but then they also were kind of bringing out this sibling rivalry kind of dynamic that created with Harry and Peter. Regardless, I think it was groundbreaking at the time. And maybe what you said, it doesn't quite stand up. I still enjoy going back and watching it. It's fine to me now.
It was a good movie. I'm not going to lie. Of the Sam Raimi trilogy, it's that one or Spider-Man 2 with Doc Ock. That's the best, where they kind of like. But the first one, I felt like they did spend a lot of time with the story. Like, I don't know. I feel like the slider was just a tiny, tiny bit too much on the plot side, and not enough on like, because we still want to see Spider-Man be Spider-Man. We still want to see the acrobatics and all the craziness, but like the CGI wasn't there, so there's a whole lot of really wide shots of still really bad CGI Spider-Man doing things,
and some wire work and that kind of thing,
and then a ridiculous like bouncing on the balloons at the parade, like, and that's probably presentism still too. Like, they did the best they could at the time, but like some of those scenes are like, okay, let's rethink this, guys.
Yeah. So there's one other thing I want to do before we move on to the next one, and that's, let's talk about the magic systems of each one. So I've mentioned this on the
pack. It's the same. They're all the same.
No, it's not the same magic system. Give me a sec.
Okay.
I've mentioned this in the past, but like the early origin of Spider-Man, they were the pinnacle of like mysterious technologies they could imagine was that there was a spider that had been exposed to radiation, and that had conducted random genetic modifications on the spider that then were transmitted to the human, altered his genetics, and made him into this mutant with useful powers.
I think that's even a little bit of retconning, because like the original one was, oh, it's a radioactive spider, and everyone was like, yep, radiation is essentially magic. We don't know how that works, so he has magic spider powers now.
I concur. So then the modern versions, particularly 2002 one, it was a genetically engineered spider that bit Peter. But it was in kind of a vague, like they bred them or something kind of way. And at each iteration, it's become more like this is a genetically modified spider where they did it on purpose to enhance certain characteristics.
Yes, because with our understanding of, like, as we understand science more and more, we realize that radioactive spider would be, like, this is a comic book joke. It's like, oh, look, a radioactive spider. Like, I saw this comic online the other day, and he deliberately had the spider bite him. And then in the last panel, he's, like, got all these, like, weird growths and tumors on him, but he's trying to wear a mask like, I'm Spider-Man.
Yeah, so this idea has developed over time as our understanding of the underlying technologies and ultimately, biology of life of insects and humans has developed over time. However, another part of the magic system that's different in this one than all the others is the source of the webs. So I'm sure at some planning meeting, they sat down and they're like, how are we going to do this? And Sam Raimi decided to abandon the canon and make it so that Peter genetically could expel webs from his body. Now, you can make a case for that. Like, if he's going to be genetically modified and do things, why wouldn't that particular abilities of spiders also be one of them?
Hashtag not my Spider-Man. Like, I was mad. Like, we've talked about this before. I was mad about that fact for 19 years, Ben, because that's ridiculous. And that is not, in no version of Spider-Man is that how it works.
My biggest problem with Spider-Man always is the fact that his webs seem to be supersonic.
When they need to be. And other times they're just not.
Right. Another part of this magic system is an old standby in comic book canon, and that is the bad guy having some type of superhuman serum.
Of course.
And in this case, it also makes him like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde crazy.
So this is something that the Sam Raimi trilogy, I think, lost, or they didn't have access to because they weren't part of the MCU, because they didn't have rights or whatever to all this other thing, or because they just didn't explore it, because this was probably before Marvel became part of Disney. But there is like running deep in the bones of all Marvel canon is everybody's trying to find the super soldier serum that made Captain America. And this is the same thing that Oscorp was doing. It's like, oh, yeah, we're working on that same serum that one guy figured out on his own during World War II, and everybody's been trying to copy it since.
Norman Osborn is at the heart of all this, just kind of like how Hank Pym is at the heart of all the like growing and shrinking things technologies.
Yes, exactly. And so Norman Osborn is trying to recreate the serum from Captain America. And this is like, oh, what's the soldier modification thing? It's like, no, hey, remember that thing we had in World War II? We would shell out all of the money the government has to have that back.
Yeah. Okay. So that was our examination of the magic system. You could see there will be some nuances we get into the other movies. So Spider-Man, on a budget of $139 million, made $825 million at the worldwide box office, which is about 6 times what it cost, and it kind of guaranteed and greenlit the way for a sequel.
Not just a sequel, but other comic book movies. Like the industry was like, oh, this did very good. Look, there's some return here.
Yeah. So then in 2004, 2 years later, they'd come out with a sequel to a lot of hype and a lot of, interesting speculation. Is this going to suffer the same kind of problem that all movies do when we have a first one that's successful and you start pumping out sequels out of Hollywood? Is it just going to suffer in quality and go downhill?
I think Spider-Man 2, arguably, I enjoy more than the first Spider-Man of the Sam Raimi trilogy. Let's put it that way. I think the character depth is explored better. I think the interactions between Doc Ock before and after his transformation, the explanation makes no sense, but like the character change is dramatic enough that you feel this disconnect, this connection, this almost bipolarism, the real Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of thing.
Yeah. So Alfred Molina kind of goes through this transformation playing Dr. Octopus as like this benevolent scientist with good motivations, but then something interferes and only exposes his selfishness and self-interest, also with some potential AI stuff going on. It's kind of weird. But this conflict where Peter also looked up to him as a mentor, and then something happened and it changed it and transformed their relationship, and there's it's just this really good human conflict at the heart of the movie, and then some really interesting stuff happening as well in the classic, like you said, man versus himself conflict of Peter trying to figure out, how do I protect my family and ones that I love, but also make a living when I can't reveal my abilities, and the world kind of getting down on him because it's hard to be Spider-Man. And I think this is a good example of when you have a good filmmaker, a good cast and crew that care about the property and get a bigger budget, what good things can come out of that.
Absolutely.
So they had $200 million to make this movie, and it has in it what I think is one of the best set pieces in all of comic book cinema. And that is when Spider-Man battles Dr. Octopus on the elevated train as it's going through the city.
Yes.
Just a classic comic book battle where he's protecting the civilians and the bad guys disregarding their life, and Spider-Man's using everything in his power to try to stop him and also protect people, and it complicates the problems that he has, and it's just so tense and well filmed and well shot, and it's classic. Even the ending, when he's expanded every bit of strength he can to finally stop the bad guy and now is helpless, and then random people help him and save him. It's fantastic.
I appreciate the sentiment at that. That's the part where it takes a dip for me, because it makes sense that the civilians would help him. It doesn't make sense that they would help him in the way that they would help a Messiah. Like that imagery got a little heavy-handed for me, but I appreciate the sentiment. Like if a couple of guys would just dragged him on and somebody started doing triage, like, oh, I'm a nurse, and started doing that, I think that'd have been more true to life. And less
Josh,
of
I'm supposed to be the one to make messianic metaphors, and I didn't even pick up on that one.
Are you serious? They crowd like he's unconscious. If you find it, all right. So Ben, I'm going to ask you this question: if somebody falls unconscious around you and you're just out in public doing your thing, what do? Do you A, lay them down, cradle their head, and then perform triage, and then get somebody to call for medical attention, or 2, crowd surf them slowly across the room that you're in, and then gently lay them down so you can worship them? Like, it was just so weird.
He was precariously perched on the front of the subway car where he'd stopped the train. They had to bring him into where it was safe. But okay, I'll let you have that one.
All right, yeah. The only downsides I have to Spider-Man 2 is sometime when they were setting up, they were going through the script with the writers in the room at the conference room. They're like, hey, so do you think anybody in our audience will know how physics or computers work? And somebody went, nah, that's fine. Okay, great. Let's just gloss over all of this. Like, I'm sitting here like trying to enjoy the movie, and one part of my brain, like the science officer running the ship in my brain, just won't shut up about that's not how fusion works.
Yeah. Now, Spider-Man 2 made slightly less money at the box office than its predecessor, and you can almost feel the corporate greed kind of coming to life in between when 2 comes out and when 3 comes out in 2007. 2004 to 2007.
I like that. The filmmakers, we gave you the opportunity. You screwed the pooch. You made less money. Now we're going to do things my way.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
In those 3 years, they produced another movie. They increased the budget another 30%. They increased the number of bad guys in the movie by 200%. And it was a disaster.
It was so bad. It was so bad, Ben. It was so cringe, and it was so disjointed. And like, the only good guy in that whole movie was Sandman. Like, they set up the bad guy as the most...
Even Peter was a bad guy in that one.
Yeah. Like, the only person that I cared about was Sandman. Like, oh, he's just doing what he can with his superpowers.
They brought Gwen Stacy in, and she wasn't even likable.
That's the real tragedy, because Gwen Stacy plays such a pivotal role in the canon. Go watch any of the Spider-Verse movies. Like, Gwen Stacy's a big deal. I love, like, I'm skipping ahead, but I love the little line, like, yeah, when in all the universes where Gwen Stacy falls for Peter Parker, it doesn't work out great for Gwen Stacy. I love that little line in Spider-Verse.
Interesting. Yeah, you're hinting at something. Let's talk about it for a sec now, because the Spider-Verse did something that you've kind of been talking about, where they codified this idea that the reason we keep retelling the Spider-Man story over and over with its common elements of like an everyman who gets these powers, which make him have this dilemma, like, what do I do with all this power now? And then the Uncle Ben speech of, with great power comes great responsibility, and then Peter maintaining a secret identity so that he can protect his loved ones, and then the tragic happenings that cause all these antagonists in his life, and him trying to get through his life despite his problems and struggles. And even though he's super, he's also like us. And all these story elements are good enough that we can just strip off the trappings of it, mix up a few details, start it over again, and tell the story again, and somehow it's fresh.
So what Spider-Man did was it canonized its meta commentary. Like, we keep retelling the Spider-Man story because we love the Spider-Man story, and then they incorporated that retelling of the story into the story itself. And
nice.
It's almost a fourth wall break by the writing crew, in a way, and I just love it to death. I can bookend that with, they do the same thing with Deadpool. Like, Deadpool is essentially Spider-Man, but like the anti-hero Spider-Man. I'm not going to dive deep into Deadpool, but I want to. Deadpool is my favorite character. But it's just back to Spider-Man. Yes, we keep retelling these same stories, and they're always like a little bit different each telling. It's almost like they canonized like the different artists, the different art directors, the different writers, the different storytellers, the different versions of the movies that came out. We canonized all of that into the Spider-Man story by creating the Spider-Verse. And then what's so great is that in a handful of these movies, we get to see that play out in cinema. That happened, obviously, that's like the core thing that's happening in the Spider-Verse trilogy. But then also in the last Home trilogy with Tom Holland, No Way Home, that is the MCU version of canonizing this multiversal retelling of the same Spider-Man story.
Yeah, I guess so. Now, in the third one, so we've got Eddie Brock as Venom, which was in all the comic books I read as a kid about Spider-Man. That's kind of a throwaway, and Topher Grace may have been a miscast there. I don't know that Tom Hardy is right either, but whatever. All that aside, then you've got Thomas Hayden Church as Sandman, and I can't think of the actor, but Harry Osborn as the reprisal of the Green Goblin, and all this is happening. And then there's Peter getting the Venom suit and having his like identity crisis, and it was just a big mess. So they spent $258 million. It was the most profitable of the three Spider-Man movies, and it was fascinating to see this thing go down in flames, having made more than the others. But as a factor of its budget, it actually made less than the other two movies.
There was one scene in that stands out to me. For you're talking about your cinematography on your elevated train fight. I really like the fight between Green Goblin, or it might be Hobgoblin in this one. I'm not sure the canon name for
Harry Osborn.
Harry Osborn, thank you. I also can't think of his name. But he fought Spider-Man in like a really narrow alley. Do you remember that scene?
Yes.
Like, it was barely wide enough for them to like be in there and like not have their shoulders touch. And just planning out the choreography of how this was going to go back and forth. And like the camera was almost doing drone shots before drone shots were a thing, like following one of the characters as they went through, and kind of, they're almost jousting in a way back and forth with how they were interacting. I think that was a really cool, well thought out fight scene.
Yeah, and of course, after the fact, when other comic book movies have been more successful, all the people involved look back on this with regret and say, oh, if only we'd been able to pull ourselves together and spit out a fourth Spider-Man movie. But I'm not going to retcon any of that. There was a lot of controversy. They started production on a fourth Spider-Man movie with Sam Raimi, and they cast John Malkovich as Vulture.
Ooh, that would have been good.
But it was kind of like that weird version of Sonic the Hedgehog that came out in the Sonic the Hedgehog movie trailer, where just there was this huge backlash on the internet. Everyone was like, I don't know, John Malkovich, he's not a good Vulture, and it can just, the ship was going down, and that was just another
go ahead and pull
chunk
the plug
of iceberg. Right, yeah. So that was 2007. It was another 5 years before we would see another Spider-Man movie, and of course, there's everything we're probably not going to talk about with the ownership of the intellectual property. But Sony rebooted and hired filmmaker Mark Webb and Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man and started the franchise over again. This time under the Amazing banner.
The Amazing Spider-Man. I do have to put this plug in because this is actually very important to the Spider-Man canon. Like, if we're talking about the meta commentary. Like you mentioned, there was all this stuff going on between Marvel, Disney, and Sony. So here's the thing. back in the day, long time ago, Marvel was going bankrupt. They needed money desperately. And so they were selling their IP for pennies on the dollar. And that's when Sony snapped up a bunch of their IP. This is where they get the X-Men rights. This is where they get the Spider-Man rights. And part of the intellectual property agreement is that the rights will revert back to Marvel if Sony doesn't use them every so often. Like, there are time triggers for them to keep this intellectual property. And
so they have to keep pumping out content.
They were bumping up against the Spider-Man expiration date if they didn't put out a Spider-Man movie, which
I wonder if it was 5 years.
I don't know if it was. I don't know how long it was, but that was part of the contractual agreement. Sony had to put out, and now they've established Spider-Man as a multi-million-dollar franchise, right? So they don't want to lose the rights that they got for pennies on the dollar. And so even if it's a bad Spider-Man movie, they needed to produce something.
That's weird. You talk about this from 30 Rock, how like there's things that can happen in the business side of producing a film or something like that that could be so overwhelming that then the success of it doesn't matter. And it sounds like that might have been the case here.
It doesn't. Yeah, it's like, oh, hey, why are we spending $100 million on a movie that we're expecting to fail? Because it's going to make sure we keep $200 million intellectual property rights.
Right. Okay. So Amazing Spider-Man comes out, they reboot. I think they wisely decide not to redo the whole like Uncle Ben thing, and they just kind of go straight into the idea that Peter Parker's father was a partner with Dr. Kirk Connors, and they came up with some revolutionary genetic engineering thing in the field of biotechnology that Dr. Connors was motivated, but for some mysterious reason, Peter's father disappears, and they don't know what happened to this critical link in the formula that could be used to potentially regenerate living tissue.
Yeah, and so more of that is explored in the second movie, and it gets fleshed out because they just like do this like, oh, the whole plot is going to be about where Peter's dad went, and then Peter gets spider powers, and we just don't care about that anymore. It's like, oh yeah, that doesn't matter. We forget about all that. Like, oh, we'll pick it back up in the second movie. And the idea is it's this altruistic scientist working for the soulless mega corporation. It's like, oh, we are working on biotechnology to heal people and cure cancer and all these degenerative diseases. Oh, but they were going to use my technology to create super soldiers and sell it to the government. Man. And then, of course, as an ethical scientist, your only option is to torch all of your research, grab everything out of the lab, and try to vanish off the face of the planet. I feel like there's other whistleblower things you could have done. But again, evil mega corporation, I get it.
So you recap that in a way that felt kind of cynical, but I think it was perfectly cynical in that when you as a filmmaker have a story that's so caricature-y and so surface level, it's not gonna resonate with people. They don't connect with the characters and the conflict. It's like giant evil mega corporations stopped by mysterious good guy, and that's it.
All right, we're going to skip ahead for a second to the second movie because that's where we pay off the whole Peter's dad like storyline. And there's a scene at the beginning where they're on a private jet. Somehow he chartered a private jet without the mega corporation finding out. Yeah, right. Good luck with that. And a guy comes out of the cabin and he sees the pilot is now dead, and this guy's clearly going to assassinate both of them after but he's trying to just shoot him. I don't get it. Like this is the dumbest assassin ever. And then the scene culminates with them in this uncontrolled dive into the middle of the ocean in this private jet. And this assassin is still trying to force a gun at Peter Parker's dad. And all I can think watching this movie is like, this guy is the most dedicated assassin I have ever seen. Everyone on this plane is going to die. Dude, you just need to bail. But he's still there making sure. It's like, no, I saw it with my own eyes. I'm not doing the bad guys from the Hercules Disney movie, Pain and Suffering. I'm not doing that where they assume everything's going to work out fine. I want to see him lifeless before I bail and report back to my evil mega corporation.
Yeah. Okay. But the second movie of the Amazing Spider-Man trilogy suffered from the same problem as Spider-Man 3, where like it felt like the corporation just got involved. It was the highest budget of all the Spider-Man movies.
Really?
Amazing Spider-Man 2's budget was $250 million, which was similar to the budget for Spider-Man 3. And they spent it on special effects, I think. And again, brought in 3 bad guys, which really seemed ill-advised. So you got Electro, and you got Harry as the Hobgoblin, and then you got Paul Giamatti as the Rhino, and then there was the Assassins, and just evil corporations, and so much going on, and it was just nonsensical. However, I went back and watched this one recently with my kids, and like you said, the resolution of the story plot thread with Peter finding out his dad's origin story actually kind of worked for me. And the scene where Peter ends up in some precarious situation, some high building for some reason, and has to try to stop the bad guy and rescue Gwen Stacy at the same time. And because of his choices, she dies. That one also worked for me. And I think it pays off really well in the new movie and the Home trilogy, where he gets some closure on that part of his story.
Yeah,
Andrew Garfield playing.
Yeah, the Andrew Garfield redid the whole dive and trying to save the girl thing. But there was other Spider-Mans there to take care of the other half of it, so he was able to save her this time.
Yeah,
I will say that movie was ridiculous from start to finish. But that scene where Stacy, like the web catches her, like, and you feel like it's just in the nick of time, but then she whiplashes the back of her head into the concrete, and like, oh, my whole family, like, watching this ridiculous movie, making fun of it the whole time. All of us went,
did the same thing.
All of us went, oh, and like, then you like just felt so bad for Peter because like you were so close.
I love that your family did this, Josh. I just felt so connected with you. So when Far From Home was about to come out and we saw potentially that the other Spider-Man would be in there, I realized that I hadn't taken the time to go back and show my kids the old Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield movies. So leading up to the come out of No Way Home, my family sat down and watched all those movies. Not like all at once, but over the course of like 2 weeks, we watched all 5 of them. And we had a good time. And yeah. We had some great moments, and then the kids had all the canon fresh in their mind, so that when we went and watched the new Tom Holland one, they had all the plot points fresh in their mind. And we did the same thing you did when we watched Amazing Spider-Man 2. We just mocked it mercilessly like the whole time because it was kind of ridiculous.
All right, so I love one plug to just get this out of the way. Emma Stone, masterpiece, chef's kiss. I love Emma Stone and everything she's ever been in.
Yeah, fantastic as Gwen Stacy. Great choice.
Now, here's a hot take for you, Ben. Are you ready for this?
Yep.
I think Andrew Garfield is a better Spider-Man than Tobey Maguire, but he's a worse Peter Parker.
Ooh, great hot take, Josh. Yeah, he was going for the whole... I don't even know how they got away with this. So, like, he's a cool kid, like a skater, and like,
yeah, he's just like
well-adjusted.
He's not a nerd photographer for the yearbook club and the outcast. No, he's just edgy and he's angsty and he's a loner, and like that's not what Peter Parker is.
Yeah, and then they cast what's his name, Martin Sheen as Uncle Ben, and Sally Field as Aunt May, and they both felt out of place. Like I never bought either of them.
Yeah, every time I saw Andrew Garfield trying to be Peter Parker, I felt like, dude, you're either one, way overacting, or two, you're being way too angsty. Like, Peter is just like an upbeat, like positive, trying to be a good guy, and he's just downtrodden. But
I've come to
he was a good Spider-Man. Like, he was snarky. He was like, when he saw the kid that was getting bullied and picked on, he helped him fix his wind turbine, was talking to him, and like got down on his level. Like, you are a great Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield, but you're a terrible Peter Parker. Never take that mask off. He's good with the
plucky remarks. He made almost one of my all-time favorite bits of internet pop culture. So there's this video that just looks like a street security camera where there's like a guy that looks like a homeless guy pretending to be Spider-Man on the side of the street with a coffee cup for people to put money into, and he's like hanging upside down, and and he's doing his thing, and somebody walks by and puts some money in his cup, and then he crawls down off the wall, picks up the money, and then pulls back the mask, and it's Andrew Garfield, and he looks at the money, he's like,
yes, that I remember that, and
link in the show notes.
Yes, that is one of the treasures that the internet will hold forever.
Yeah. And Andrew Garfield, I think, is just a gem. I've come to appreciate his acting. So when I went back and watched it, I really had an H of G for him, where he was making a thespial decision to portray Spider-Man the way that he did. It didn't always work, but somehow it played even better into this idea when they brought all of them together in No Way Home.
Yeah, he was different enough that he felt like his own unique character.
Yeah.
I will say that... sorry, you want to go ahead?
Do you know enough about the canon to explain the difference between Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man?
No, I don't. Unfortunately, I'm sorry.
Right,
I think that was just a different. I think it was just a different run of comics where they do this all the time. It's like, oh, let's reboot. Let's tell the story a little bit differently with a little like updated a little bit more. flesh out some of the things that people are
to
clamoring
signal
for.
to our readers that we know that this is different.
Well, I think like in the Amazing Spider-Man 1, like him getting bitten by a radioactive spider and getting the spider powers was like 3 panels. I think that was like the whole thing. And so then when your fan base after years is like clamoring for, you need to flesh this out and tell us more of the story, then you get to reboot and then like really like focus in and zero in on different things. Okay. I think that's what that was.
I have to play a bit of catch up on the magic system stuff. So in this Spider-Man universe, still he gets the climbing powers and the spider sense and the quick reaction time, but he doesn't get web shooters. So he of course uses his scientific powers to create it, and it's played out to good laughs in the No Way Home movie. I also skipped over Cold Fusion in Spider-Man 2, and now we've got Electro. I guess it's some kind of experiment in Oscorp that happened that turned.
It wasn't Electro was ridiculous. Electro was an electrical engineer that got electrocuted and then fell into a tank of electric eels. Like, he died 3 times, which somehow gave him electricity powers. That makes no sense.
Dr. Connors is just more engineering, but gone wrong, so he becomes more of the lizard than just changing human DNA to regenerate. And what else am I missing?
He was missing an arm, and he was trying to, like, lizards can regenerate. That's put lizard DNA in people, and it worked, and it gave him a lizard arm, but also gave him a big Abdullah Oblongata for all of you Waterboy fans out there. And so he just became Killer Croc. And for some reason, he got in his head, you know what would make everything better? If everybody was lizards, and then I wouldn't be so weird, I guess was his plan. So he was going to turn the whole city of New York into lizards, but hang on, his formula only ever works temporarily. He has to keep taking it to stay a lizard. So he was going to turn the whole city lizards for a little while? I don't get it.
So we've got alien symbiotes, we've got massive advancements in technology, we've got self-regenerating proto-humans crossed with other species, but the one that I think is the most implausible is Dr. Octopus's arms.
That's like, the one that's most implausible?
I could just never handle it. Like, just the massive amount of energy that would take, the flexibility of it, the intelligence of it, the coordination of it all, I couldn't handle it.
We've got
we got flying speeder sleds, we've got alien symbiotes, we got regenerating lizards, but the one I couldn't handle was Dr. Octopus's arms.
All right, here's my thing, man. Like, I don't disagree with you, but I just put Sandman one place higher on that list than Dr. Octopus. I agree with these arms look like they weigh 800 pounds. Your legs would just crumple underneath you. Like, I'm with you there. But when do you charge them? Where's the power source? You would need cold fusion to run these arms. Yeah, no, I'm with you. But Sandman, think about Sandman for like 5 seconds. Like, there's nothing makes any sense with Sandman.
No, you're right. It just, I'm not even going to try.
All right. I've got to take this tangent for a second. Have you ever seen the How It Should Have Ended for the Spider-Man 3 with Sandman?
Remind me. I have, but I forgot.
Listeners, if you haven't seen How It Should Have Ended, go watch those. They're hilarious. There's a scene with the Sandman where he falls into the pit where they're going to do the experiment. Like, and they show the scientists in the bunker like, oh, hey, I just got an uptick in the silicon content or whatever. It's like, oh, it's probably just a bird. Let's keep going. And then they do, and then he turns into Sandman. In the How It Should Have Ended, one of the scientists comes in from off camera and he goes, how about you go out there and check? How about you take 5 seconds, get up from your desk, walk out there and make sure it's a bird before you turn some guy into a supervillain with sand powers.
Yeah. Nice.
Okay. Now, with that out of the way, are you going to keep going on the magic system, or?
Well, no. The Mark Webb franchise of Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 kind of reached critical mass and had the same kind of meltdown as the Sam Raimi versions.
If we're talking about the Mark Webb films, it goes back to I liked Spider-Man. I liked Andrew Garfield better than Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man. And all of the scenes where he's Spider-Man, I like those better. In all the scenes where he's Peter Parker, I like it less.
It's a good hot take.
The films in general, I think the Mark Webb films suffer from pacing and editing. I feel like both of those movies, well, the first one especially, The Amazing Spider-Man 2012 especially, felt like there were parts of it that like, oh, and we just don't want to tell this part of the story. And you just get these smash cuts that go at breakneck speeds that advance the plot. And then in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, it felt like they filmed 8 hours worth of movie and had to cut it down to the runtime that it was, which one was already kind of long. And two, it created these really disjointed scenes that, like, why are we still caring about this plot thread? It was, oh, I was an intern at Oscorp for 15 minutes. I know how to reboot this electrical grid. You need me. Okay, now hang on a second. Then, like, let's take a mental stretch. I looked at the plans once. I know how to reboot this entire electrical grid. You know what, Emma Stone? I'm gonna give you that. Where you lose me is when you're in the building and the reboot is just a covered switch. You open the switch, you pull the lever, and the system reboots. Emma, you just needed to tell Andrew how to do that. He could have done it on his own.
Yeah.
It wasn't even hidden. It wasn't even a back room. It was in the dead center of the console, and it was 5 times bigger than every other switch that was there. And
there's a name for those kind of plot holes. Like, for instance, in the movie Saw, when he has to cut off his leg to get the cell phone across the room, the distance from his hand to the cell phone is less than the length of the saw that he uses to cut off his own leg.
Yeah, so it's like, oh no, my only option is to use this tool to extend my reach. Obviously, that's the first thing that you would do.
Yeah, there's a name for those kinds of plot holes. I don't know what to call it, but that's an example. So all in all, again, this one just kind of went into the same kind of meltdown as the previous trilogy. They were potentially looking at releasing a third one in 2018 that never materialized, and then the Marvel Cinematic Universe was starting to pick up speed. They teased Spider-Man in Captain America: Civil War, and then we get
they didn't tease anything. Hang on a second. You are not going to gloss over, like, the emotional meltdown that I had in the theater in Civil War when Spider-Man showed up out of nowhere, okay?
I'm just saying it wasn't his movie yet.
It wasn't his movie, but I still peed my pants. Like, it was... like Tom Holland did a backflip and stole Cap's shield in the moment, and... like, the 5 minutes that Spider-Man is in Civil War is the best 5 minutes of Spider-Man that we have. That is peak Spider-Man.
I think fans everywhere were in violent agreement that Tom Holland as Peter Parker and Spider-Man was just a breath of fresh air and a revelation. Like, everything you wanted Spider-Man to be and become.
In that fight scene, we get to see Spider-Man almost casually outperforming, like, all of the other superheroes. And, like, he's like a 14-year-old kid, which is fantastic. He has all of the best lines in that fight. And it's just great.
In the whole movie.
Sam Wilson, like, acknowledges, like, he's webbed up. And, like, Spider-Man's like, are those carbon fibers? That's really great. You know, there's usually not this much talking. And you can see Spider-Man almost go, oh, yeah, okay. You have a metal arm. That's so cool. Hey, have you seen this really old movie, Empire Strikes Back? Good Lord, Tony, how old is this kid? Like, Spider-Man was the best part of that whole thing.
Yeah, and that movie's fine. While we're at it, let's talk about all of them. So Spider-Man, I think, as a character in the Spider-Man universe, has this kind of eternal longing, not just to be himself, but he wants to feel like part of something bigger than himself. He wants to feel like he's contributing. That's one of the ongoing ethics of Peter Parker, is that he wants to contribute. In some ways, he can't do that all by himself as a kid in Brooklyn, so he wants to belong to a team that can help him find things to do to help.
Well, in the canon of the movies, he got recruited by Tony Stark to go do this amazing thing. And then this is every person that you've ever met where you can tell that they peaked in high school or college and they just want to live that peak for the rest of their lives. This is what Peter Parker's doing. Peter is constantly just like, I fought Captain America and it was amazing. And he just wants back in. Put me in, coach. I'm so ready.
Yeah. So obviously when Earth is invaded by an alien species and a megalomaniacal warlord trying to extinct half of all living life in the universe, you're going to need to bring Peter Parker on board. So, of course, he's there for Infinity War and Endgame and plays a minor role in those. But again, he's not wasted. Like, he has the same kind of moments of snippy dialogue and brings an element of lightheartedness and youth and fresh perspective to every scene he's in.
Here's something that you might not know about, but in the canon of the comic books, Spider-Man and Tony Stark are very close. Like, Peter Parker does an actual internship and gets a job with Tony Stark, and Tony Stark knows his secret identity, and Tony Stark makes him the Iron Spider suit and all of those other things. And so the fact that they wove that so seamlessly into the movies and the MCU, that there is this bond and connection between the two characters, just like just emotions pour out of me. Like they're being so true to the source material, and I love it so much.
Oh, and Robert Downey Jr. and Tom Holland just nail it. Like, of all of the loving connections, whether it be, you know, actual romantic or just familial, that feels like the most resonant and genuine in all of the MCU. Is the Peter Parker Tony Stark relationship.
First of all, Robert Downey Jr. is the best Tony Stark that we have ever and will ever have. So he is Tony Stark as far as I'm concerned. Right. But Tom Holland was such a good casting job, and for so many reasons. Like I've talked about this before, but one, the fact that he's
athletic,
he's an actual teenager, and so when he's being teenage angsty, it comes across very genuine because
right, as opposed to adults pretending to be in high school,
as opposed to this high school in the Tobey Maguire movie full of 35-year-old people walking down hallways. Like that's
terrible.
But
it's
also
cringy every time they do it.
Tom Holland, like he didn't know, he's British. He's one of those secret Brits. He didn't know what it was like to be in American high school. So before the movies, they sent him to American high school for a couple of months. And then I told you this story. One girl caught on, like, why are you even here? You're so weird. It's like, oh, actually, I'm not really attending school. I'm just learning what it's like to be in American high school because I'm Spider-Man. And she didn't believe him, which is fantastic. Second, I love this little anecdote too, because he was auditioning for Spider-Man for Civil War. And he was like, before the audition happened, like he saw that they had a bunch of, like they were doing like stunt rehearsals or something off to the side, and they had a bunch of pads laid out, and he is a gymnast. Like he has all these like physical, like he's a physical guy. He can do like back handsprings and junk himself as the actor. And he talked to a guy on the side. He's like, hey, this is all for the stunt guys, and this is the stunt coordinator. He's like, well, yeah, this is for the stunt guys we're not using. He's like, do you mind if I like do some flips or whatever as part of my audition for Spider-Man? And the guy goes, I saw an interview with this guy, the stunt coordinator, and he goes, well, for insurance reasons, I have to tell you that you can't use any of this stuff because you're not part of the crew and you're not covered by the film's insurance. But you are auditioning for Spider-Man. And so Tom Holland took that exactly how he should. And then while everybody was coming up and reading lines, Tom Holland like did like a couple back handsprings and then a standing backflip and then started delivering his lines.
Awesome. Oh, I haven't seen that. I'm going to see if I can dig it up and put it in the show notes. Okay, so this is where things start to get interesting, because I said that they teased Spider-Man in Captain America Civil War, but that's exactly what happened, because there was still this corporate divide where the MCU was happening under Disney, but Sony still owned Spider-Man. So there was this interesting corporate cooperation happening where they let this character of Spider-Man be in the one movie, and then the next year Homecoming comes out, which is actually a prequel to what happened in Captain America Civil War.
Homecoming? No. It happened after that.
They go back and tell...
They tell the story of Vulture, where he came from, which was the events right after the first Avengers movie. But then immediately after that, we get an 8-year time skip that shows the Vulture is up and running and doing his thing. And then it's we get the videographer. Like the opening scene is Peter's cell phone footage of the events leading up to Civil War and then coming home. So right. Like it takes place immediately after the events of Civil War.
Got it. Okay. So we go back, we introduce the character Vulture, cast for Michael, I can't think of his name, who's
Keaton?
The best Michael Keaton, who's the best Batman, was great as Vulture. In this movie, so they nailed the high school thing. Like just
absolutely. That feels so
snappy,
high school.
Felt right. It wasn't just like a bunch of adults pretending to be in high school. It actually felt like kids. You know, the TV channel that was run by the kids, and the interactions between the classmates and the awkward romantic connections. Everything was just chef's kiss, spot on, good high school stuff.
I love, my favorite character in the whole movie is the gym teacher that just does not care. He was standing on the wrong side of the video that Captain America was playing, because Captain America pointed to the other side of the screen. You're a gym teacher. And then the gym teacher waved. And then after the video, he turned it off and he goes, yeah, all right, you heard, Cap. Pretty sure this guy's a war criminal now, but whatever. Let's do some sit-ups.
Yeah. Okay, so this movie has one of my favorite scenes in all of comic book moviedom. It's the reveal when Peter gets in the car to take MJ, his prom date, to prom and realizes that his girlfriend's dad is his arch enemy, and they both come to the realization at the same time.
I'll tell you what, this is my son hadn't seen the movie in years and years, and we sat down, we watched it, and like he had the same reaction that I did the first time, like gasped audibly, like no, and I'm like, you forgot, didn't you? He's like, I did. I'm like, yes, that's the guy. Peter knows, he doesn't. And then he starts cluing in like, okay, thank you for having a villain that's smart enough to recognize, I feel like I've heard your voice before in the handful of interactions, like everybody would, right?
Yeah, smart villains are way more compelling than dumb ones.
Again, this is another time you need to go watch the How It Should Have Ended, because there's that scene where he sends his daughter into the prom and then he pulls a gun and casually puts it on the seat and starts talking to Peter. It's like,
right.
You saved my... And this is a believable villain. Like, you are trying to stop me and shut down my entire business, but you saved my daughter. So I'm going to give you this opportunity to just walk away. There's no reason that we have to continue to be enemies. Like, okay, in the Tobey Maguire movie with Green Goblin captures Spider-Man, paralyzes him, and has this conversation where he's trying to recruit him, and then mysteriously disappears for another whole act of the movie, okay? That is an unbelievable interaction, why the villain would let the hero go at that time. Now we have this one where it makes perfect sense in the context of the situation. Dropping off the prom and understanding the dynamic between the two, where the villain has motivation and reason to let the hero walk away with the knowledge that he has, because it felt so real. Now again, though, How It Should Have Ended was perfect because they did like 5 versions of that scene where he's like, I will kill you and I will kill everyone you love. I love Liz, your daughter. Are you going to kill her? And then it just stops him, Michael Keaton, cold in his tracks. And then there's another one where he's like, I will kill you and everyone you love. And Spider-Man just grabs his hand. Is like, oh, I have super strength. Do you have super strength? No? That's weird. Help! This adult is threatening me with a gun. Like, it's just, there's so many ways that Spider-Man could have gotten out of that. But again, it downplays the emotional tension of the scene.
Yeah, that's a problem for writers, is how to take these fantastical magic systems, and they are magic systems, and then create human drama that's compelling to us as a viewer, reader, or listener.
They did it. Like that scene alone, like that scene where Peter Parker realizes the bad guy is his girlfriend's dad, and that he's a bad guy objectively, but he's not a bad guy. Like, you know what I mean? Like
that scene made me feel things. I was like shocked and dismayed, and there was suspense, and I felt tense, and I didn't know what was going to happen, and I wasn't sure what I really wanted to be.
And here's the thing: like it is completely legitimate at that moment for Peter Parker to walk away. Like, I feel like the rest of the movie, if Peter just walked away, like, you know what? He gave me a clear opportunity. This is out of my league. Like, Iron Man told me to leave this alone. He's going to handle it. And let's be fair. Even if Ultra did get away with that jet full of whatever he was trying to steal from Tony Stark still would have shut him down in like 5 seconds. They were on totally different levels. Yeah. But it's still, Peter could have taken the offer and it would have been fine. It would have been a completely legitimate course of action, and I wouldn't have blamed him.
So, is there anything new introduced in the magic system here? I guess there's the Marvel Cinematic Universe of the introduction of alien technology that's what's enabling Vulture's powers, but Peter's pretty much the same. Bit by a spider powers, science invented web shooters, that's Spider-Man.
Yep. I love that we don't have to redo the whole Uncle Ben thing. Like, we got it. We know where Spider-Man came from. We don't have to do that. Yeah. And so we just get core Spider-Man. Spoilers. This is by far my favorite Spider-Man movie. This is the Spider-Man movie, in my opinion.
Spoilers for our top 10 list. Okay. Now, something interesting happens here in that hasn't happened previously, and there's something else going on, and that is Sony Animation Studios was also working on Miles Morales as Spider-Man, and that comes out the year after this, and in between this one and its sequel.
Can we talk about Tom Glover for a second? Donnie Glover.
Go ahead.
The actor in
Donald Glover that was in Homecoming, where Spider-Man.
Did you catch his
webs
name?
His hand to the trunk. Yes. Go ahead. Do the whole thing. I can't.
Yeah. So Donald Glover has a long-standing history with Spider-Man in the weirdest way possible.
Didn't we talk about this already on the podcast?
I think I talked to you about this. I don't know if we've talked about it on the podcast.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll go through it as quickly as possible. While Donald Glover was a part of Community, there was rumors that they were going to make a Miles Morales version of a Spider-Man movie, and the internet petitioned very, very hard, the way the internet does, to make Donald Glover Miles Morales as Spider-Man. And during one of the episodes of Community, they're showing this scene where he's waking up out of bed and he's stretching and he's wearing Spider-Man pajamas. And this is during that episode came out during this entire internet craze thing. Then Miles Morales comes out. It's an animated movie. And in Uncle Aaron's apartment, in the background on the TV, you can see he's watching that episode of Community with Donald Glover getting out of his bed, stretching in the Spider-Man pajamas. And then in Homecoming, Donald Glover makes a cameo as did you catch his name of the bad guy that he webbed his hand to the trunk and was talking to him and interviewed and figured out where the weapon sale was going down?
Yeah, it was Aaron.
Aaron Davis. That's the name of the uncle that died. That was the Prowler in the Spider-Verse movies. And then to put the cherry on top, in the latest Across the Spider-Verse trilogy, we have Donald Glover as Aaron Davis, live action in the Prowler suit. Like that, they wove Donald Glover somehow into the canon of Spider-Man as Aaron Davis / the Prowler, and it's great.
Yeah, I think the internet can go wrong with those kinds of things, but in this case, it just rewards the faithful viewer and maybe someone that even participated in that. You can feel like a little part of influencing this universe.
This was okay. Like if you didn't know any of that happened, it doesn't matter. It doesn't play in. But if you're part of the internet culture that did this, it feels like such a victory, and it's so cool to see all these little things that happened. So
a lot of these movies we're talking about, this is the first time we're talking about them on the podcast, but we've talked at length about both Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse on here.
So we don't have to go into the depth on those.
Right. But they're interlaced with the Home trilogy, Homecoming, Far From Home, No Way Home. So 2017 Homecoming, 2018 Into, 2019 Far From Home, and then Across just came out this year, 2 years after No Way Home. It's weird the way it goes. It's hard to say what their intent is with the animated ones. Like, do they intend for them to kind of be influenced and part of the current Marvel Cinematic Universe, or is it just something else?
I think those are wholly owned by Sony. I think we get the Marvel and we get the Sony logos, but we don't get the Disney logos. So I think it's 100% a Sony property that's acknowledging the existence of the other Sony properties.
There's little crossovers, like you said, though, like Donald Glover. He was live action Aaron, whatever.
Yeah, but I don't think he signed a contract with Disney to be, like Disney doesn't own Donald Glover.
Sure. Okay. So then Far From Home. Let's talk about that one. So now, again, we've got kind of these implications from the MCU where Tony Stark apparently wronged some intern who now has become Mysterio. They want to
It's quite believable that Tony Stark wronged a ton of people in his career as the a megalomaniacal,
that's the
person.
Source of plot in more than one movie.
Tony Stark wronging somebody and them seeking revenge on Tony Stark, creates a whole lot of supervillains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah. Okay, so we have Mysterio and a school field trip. I wasn't a big fan of this one, Josh. It feels kind of small-minded. It's a bit angsty. It feels like a lot of it should have just been an episode of some teenager-y sitcom on Disney Channel.
Okay, so this is probably my biggest pet peeve with this movie. Like, it's still good and still worth seeing.
Sure.
But I'm not going to be sitting around on a Saturday being like, I'm going to watch a movie. Ooh, let's get Far From Home. Like, first of all, Mysterio, I hate when they do this. Like, the obvious villain is framed as the good guy at the beginning. Because it's not a surprise, guys. Mysterio is a classic Spider-Man villain, has been for decades.
He's Chekhov's gun. Yeah.
The only thing you're going to surprise me with is when and why he twists and becomes the villain. Oh, he was the villain the whole time.
That's such a fundamental mistake, and I totally agree with you. The let's surprise them by letting us think that Mysterio might be a good guy. Like, anyone that even his name sounds like a bad guy.
Anybody that Googled the word Mysterio before they went to the theater, the first line in the Wikipedia article, I think, is a classic Spider-Man villain.
Yeah, there's no point in the history of ever where Mysterio was a good guy. So when you hear that the bad guy for this movie is going to be, when you hear that Mysterio is going to be in this movie, you're just waiting for the reveal.
Yeah, that's the thing.
That was a big mistake.
So my biggest pet peeve with this movie is that it felt like you could almost evenly slice it into episodes of a Disney Plus TV series.
Yeah. And I do enjoy watching Tom Holland interact, less so some of the other actors that, like the girlfriend and Ned have their like their vacation fling summer romance. Okay. All right. Fine. a little bit more development of the homecoming version of Flash Thompson, which I find compelling and kind of interesting.
They
introduction.
They focused on the story beats that we don't care about, to the detriment of story beats we do care about. This was the first movie in the MCU that acknowledged that took place after everybody came back from being dead for 5 years.
I agree, and they had some important things to say there, and I like that part of it.
Yeah, but they barely explored it at all. Like, that easily could have been what drove the entire plot of this movie, but it's almost like they do touch on it, but it's just so unsatisfying. It's like, no, that's the meat that I want to eat for this whole meal. Why are you taking it away as if it was the appetizer?
Yeah, they just decide to introduce a new magic system to be their main plot device. Which is that before Tony Stark died, he put this defense system into orbit in space, and a pair of sunglasses operates it all, and Peter is the only one that worked for it, but he can give it to whoever he wants.
It's such a MacGuffin. It's such a ridiculous MacGuffin. And granted, it makes sense in the context of the movie and of all the other ridiculous things that Tony Stark has put into space for reasons, because he could. But this movie is a juxtaposition. It's dualities. It's, man, this is a really compelling story about how the death of Iron Man is affecting Peter Parker. Man, why are they telling this stupid side quest story about Ned and his girlfriend instead of telling me about the blip? This is a really interesting thing with Spider-Man trying to integrate himself into an Avengers-level threat and interfacing with Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury. Why do I care about his stupid name that the Europeans have given him and he's not wearing the right suit or whatever? Like, it's just like, there's such good ideas on one side and you're fleshing out all the wrong stuff.
We need to come up with a name for this, because I think there's a whole factor of expectation where, as a fan, you like consider the possibilities with the setup they've given you. With everything that's happened up to this point in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and this partnership between Sony and Disney or whatever, the possibilities are so great. And yet what you actually accomplished didn't live up to those possibilities. And so I'm disappointed with it, even though objectively it was pretty good.
It was pretty good. This is the thing, though. It could have been... it's hard to quantify and say, like, oh, it wasn't what it could have been. Like, that's just opportunity cost. But what you were saying, the ingredients that were put on the table. Imagine a boardroom with all of these story points up to this point, like, laid out on the table. I can see half of the board being like, this is great stuff. We need to explore all of this in depth, and we have a great lens to do that with this angsty teenager already going through emotional trauma to really explore the death of Tony Stark, the disappearance and reappearance of half the world's population. And then the other half of the boardroom is like, nah, screw that. We got a cool Spider-Man villain. Let's make this an awesome action movie. And then at the head of the table is this corporate guy that both sides are trying to persuade, like, go our way because it'll be the better movie.
Yeah. No, I do want to give props to the climactic action scenes where Peter is being attacked by Mysterio, who has, gained power over this really powerful weapon system, and he doesn't know what's real and what isn't. There's some fantastic things done in the action at the end of that movie that I think stand up really well.
It wouldn't be an MCU movie if we didn't have a disposable CGI army in the third act.
All right, so then we got Far From Home. We talked at length in the last episode about Across the Spider-Verse, so now that leads us to No Way Home.
No Way Home was, it was, I think Disney knew that the Sony agreement, it was all falling to pieces. There was a whole big blow up on the internet where Sony wanted more of the money and Disney didn't want to give it to them, and so that whole agreement was falling apart. And it felt like the divorce where both spouses were like, yeah, we're going to do one more Christmas and then this is over forever.
Oh, man, that's a great metaphor, Josh. I love it. It's the one last Christmas before the divorce. Oh, okay. That's beautiful.
So their whole point was, you know what? Let's put a bow on this whole thing. Let's tie up a bunch of loose ends. Let's try to tell a compelling story. We're not going to have access to any of Sony's stuff after this, so let's pull all of it in right now. And Daddy Disney's got the money to get Tom Holland, or not Tom Holland, but Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield out of retirement for this.
I love it. And I've watched some of the like behind the scenes kind of playing and stuff, and the writers are like, they kept asking for more, and the corporate guys kept saying yes, and so they just kept asking for more, thinking like they couldn't possibly also say yes to bringing back Willem Dafoe and Thomas Hayden Church and like they just did a who's who of like
Jamie
all the
Foxx,
great Jamie Foxx and everybody, and bring them all back all into one place. And for good measure, we'll throw in Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange, and they just...
Zendaya as MJ still, which is fantastic. All right, so this is all right, I'm going to extend my metaphor. It's Disney and Fox are getting a divorce. They're going to go through one last Christmas, and the fans and the writers are the kids asking for all the presents, and neither parent is saying no. It's like, yes, just yes, everything that you want.
That's awesome. Okay, now, but this is where it should have gone wrong. It should have gone like the Amazing Spider-Man second movie did, or the third original trilogy Spider-Man movie, and you brought in too many bad guys and too many good ideas, and it all just went to crap, and it didn't.
Well, now there's nitpicks. We can nitpick. I think they gave Jamie Foxx way too many lines, and that was probably built in his contract. The only way to get him back was to give him more lines than he deserved, because why is Electro even talking right now? The grown-ups are doing things. Shut up, Jamie Foxx.
Okay.
Like, we're telling a much better story with Dr. Octopus and Willem Dafoe. You be quiet. And yeah, it should have gone wrong for so many reasons, and the premise was absolutely ludicrous, but it just turned into a spectacle, and it turned into such a great story. And okay, the way that they built in the retelling of the all right, it was also my payoff for, yes, Tobey Maguire is weird and he's not the real Spider-Man. Yes, thank you. I can forever forget about his stupid, gross web shooters. But then they rewove and retold the Uncle Ben story in an unexpected, unanticipated, but organic way that I really appreciated. And Tom Holland acted the crap out of it. Tom Holland was the only Spider-Man that didn't get the Uncle Ben death scene to act out. And he did the best. Of the three live-action Spider-Men, he did the best, like Uncle Ben death.
And we'd invested a lot more time in Marissa Tomei as Aunt May. Like, we to be fair to everyone involved, you know, they didn't just try to set up this domino and knock it down in the same movie. We'd had, 6 movies with her in it?
Yeah. That's something we haven't mentioned. I feel like anytime you get Robert Downey Jr. and Marissa Tomei in the same building, I think everybody in the building can feel, like, gets on the edge of the seat, like, ooh, this is going to be good.
That's good. That's good movie charisma and chemistry there. Okay, so in my opinion, again, spoilers for our list at the end, this is my favorite of the Home trilogy. Just the audacity of it, the execution of it, the compelling conflict, how much they tried to do and how many they accidentally got right, and the chemistry between the 3 actors playing Spider-Man, that had already kind of been shown that it would work in the animated one, this idea of like Spider-Man feeling lonely but then feeling a kinship to someone else that goes through the same things that he does. It was just perfect. I just loved it.
It makes sense. Peter Parker is the type of person that would have a kinship with himself. Like, he's trying to be a nice guy anyway, and nobody understands Peter Parker better than Peter Parker.
Yeah.
And key to the whole thing was exactly what I wanted. It was Spider-Man reconciling his spider life versus his civilian life. That's what caused this whole Doctor Strange magical nonsense to happen. It's like, I just need my life to be normal again. Can we please undo everything that we did?
All right, so let's do some rapid fire things here. Who's the best Spider-Man?
Tom Holland. He's the only Spider-Man in my mind. He's the best Spider-Man.
I'm going to agree, but I'm going to give a honorable mention to Shameik Moore as Miles Morales. He's not Peter Parker, and probably my favorite is Peter B. Parker, played by Jake Johnson.
I'm not going to rank the other ones. Like, the other guys, you are great Spider-Man too. You're different Peter Parkers. It's fine, but you don't hold a candle to Tom Holland. Sorry.
Notable women in the Spider-Man universe.
Mary Jane Watson and Gwen Stacy, obviously,
and Aunt May. Okay, so who are the definitive versions of those 3?
Ooh, good call. I like Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy, but I don't know if that's because she's the best Gwen Stacy or if she's just Emma Stone, and I love Emma Stone.
Yeah, it's hard between her and Haley Steinfeld as Spider-Gwen, but yes, I'll go with Emma Stone.
I think Zendaya does a very interesting version of Mary Jane Watson. I like her Mary Jane Watson quite a bit. At the same time, I think, who's
Kirsten Dunst.
Kirsten Dunst. I was growing up, had a crush on Kirsten Dunst because she is very cute, but she can't. I don't think she can act worth a damn. Like, I just can't.
She's another person suffering from the fact of she was too old to play a young teenager.
It was like there was one part in the first Spider-Man movie where she was like experiencing domestic disturbance, like in her house, and came out back and was sad for 5 seconds, and then went super flirty, like on the turn of a dime. And maybe that's just teenage hormones, but Kirsten Dunst, you did not do that scene very well.
Yeah, I'm going with Zendaya too, even though she was a bit quirky and different than the usual, kind of plucky kind of mainstream MJ that's usually depicted in the comics.
That makes way more sense that Peter Parker would get together with not the popular girl, but the weird quirky one. That makes way more sense.
What about Aunt May?
Ooh, Aunt May. I think the Spider-Verse, animated Aunt May, I think she's got to be the best one.
Yep, played by classic comedian and actress Lily Tomlin is, I think, the definitive Aunt May. I like Marissa Tomei, but I never was on board with the young Aunt May thing. I always felt like she needs to be old.
I also appreciate that in the Spider-Verse trilogy, Aunt May isn't a damsel. She's like a support character almost. Things happen and she's not like, oh no, the bad guys are at my house. It's more like, hey guys, take it outside. This is my couch.
Yeah. All right. What about other actors and actresses that pwned the role? Maybe owned it so well that you could never imagine anyone else in the role.
Dr. Octopus, I forget in the Tobey Maguire films.
Alfred Molina is Dr. Octopus.
Okay, this was a good casting choice. 1, that guy's a solid actor. 2, he knew the role that he was playing and did it well. And 3, nothing against him or anything, but Dr. Octopus in the comics is a more heavy-set guy. He's not this huge-built dude. He's a scientist, and the guy portrayed that physicality perfectly.
Awesome. I can never imagine anyone else as Green Goblin but Willem Dafoe. Just owns that role. And his reprisal in No Way Home was stole every scene he was in.
He does a very good Jekyll and Hyde. Very, very good.
Now, Alfred Molina was an excellent Dr. Octopus, but reimagining Dr. Octopus as a woman in the Spider-Verse by Kathryn Hahn, who was also the witch in WandaVision. I can't remember the witch's character.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Those two are the same person, but she was excellent. However, my tops goes to J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. No one will ever be.
You can't. J.K. Simmons is J. Jonah Jameson. I think they revamped the comics that it's now just J.J. Simmons and all of they just draw him in the comics now. I that scene with the reveal of the female Dr. Octopus was such a great subversion of expectations. It's oh, what's your name? Oh, I can't wait to watch you die. What's your name again? Elizabeth Octavia. Let me guess, your friends call you Dr. Octopus? No, my friends call me Liv. My enemies. My enemies call me Dr. Octopus. That was a great scene.
Classic. So these 10 movies have made $8.9 billion at the box office. I don't think we've seen the end of Spider-Man in our lifetime or even in the next 2 years.
Well, Sony's going to come up on their revamp of their license at some point. Is this the Spider-Verse movies count? I guess the Sony animation.
So the animation ones haven't made as much at the box office as the others have. I don't know why. I guess people just have an aversion to them, but they make enough that they can keep going. They're not losing money. The most successful of all the trilogies is the Home trilogy with Tom Holland.
To all my American listeners, get over yourselves. Animation is a legitimate art form. You're going to make fun of me for being an anime nerd, but I am, because it doesn't matter. It's just a storytelling choice. The same way that filmmakers choose to film in black and white versus color. Whether you want to do a movie in live action or animation, it's just a style choice. The movie is just as good.
So of the 4 trilogies, I'm putting that in air quotes, where do you feel like the second movie was better than the first?
I think The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was better than The Amazing Spider-Man. The Amazing Spider-Man suffered from just weird pacing and editing more so than the second one. That said, the third act in Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a complete dumpster fire. We didn't need a surprise Green Goblin at the end. We could have figured out how to kill Emma Stone with Electro just as easily. I don't know why they did that, but I do still think Amazing Spider-Man 2 is better than Amazing Spider-Man. Across the Spider-Verse might be a little better than Into the Spider-Verse, but you can't watch the second one without watching the first one. There's too much lore that is built in the first one, so I don't know if that counts. They feel like just one movie that's split with big intermissions.
And in the Sam Raimi trilogy, you also already said the second one's better, so then you're saying the only one where the second one was worse than the first is the Tom Holland trilogy?
Yeah, I think that's the case. And now that there's an argument to be made that Civil War was the first MCU Spider-Man movie and Homecoming was the second, which would make the second Spider-Man movie the best one.
This. It just makes it too complicated. I'm not going to say that Amazing Spider-Man 2 was better than the first one, so I'm going to give it 50%. You gave 3 out of 4. Okay. Good on them. Why do we love the Spider-Man myth so much? We've kind of talked about it. What is it about it that makes it work for us? Why do people want to hear this story over and over?
For me, I think it's the hero with 1,000 faces. Not only that, but I think it's also we can easily put ourselves in the role of Peter Parker. Yeah, nobody knows what it's like to be Spider-Man and have to balance their other real life. But everybody knows what it's like to have a professional life with professional expectations and like things that I should do for my career. But then having the life at home that this is the life that I want to live. I'm going through this now. I'm looking for I got my CPA, so I'm looking at new jobs. And everybody that I interview with, the expectation is, we work 50 hours a week, and then during tax season, we're here 60 to 70 hours. And me sitting here silently going, I don't want that life.
You just leveled up in life. You just got a new superpower.
Ugh, I got a new No. I finally got yet another bureaucratic agency to acknowledge, yeah, I am pretty smart. Would you please pay me more? That's all that happened.
That's a superpower.
Ugh, gross. Stop it.
What is the significance of the Raimi trilogy in the pantheon of comic book movies? Do you think it's significant?
I think Sam Raimi demonstrated it was a litmus test that there is ways that you can translate these comic book plot lines successfully onto film in a way that makes sense for film. And let's not forget that Spider-Man came out in 2002, Spider-Man 2 was 2004, Spider-Man 3 was 2007, and Iron Man was 2008. Yeah. So I think there's some interesting timing there where we see the first 2 Spider-Man movies come out to like good box office numbers and to good like people acknowledge. Yeah.
So even though 3 crashed and burned, it paved the way for Iron Man.
By the time 3 crashed and burned, they were already filming Iron Man, so that didn't really factor into the equation.
Okay. Wow, that was good. All right, it's time for our top 10 list.
Ooh, all right. You want to go first? You want me to go first?
So let's trade numbers, and we'll start from the bottom up. So my number 10 is Spider-Man 3 from the Sam Raimi trilogy. It's still watchable, but it's easily the worst of the bunch.
Yeah, the middle part of this list is going to be hard, but the top 3 and the bottom 3 are easy. Spider-Man 3 is just bad. There's so many memes about it. Tobey Maguire, you don't dance well. I don't know why they did that to you. We need to find the video where that guy that removes all the music from movies to see how ridiculous they are. That's one that he did, and they show Tobey Maguire like pelvic thrusting on the sidewalk in New York City. Yeah, you're a sex offender is what you're doing there, Tobey Maguire.
Okay, at number 9 on my list, I put Amazing Spider-Man 2. I think you put this one higher on yours.
Yeah, I think Amazing Spider-Man, unfortunately, gets the second to worst list for me.
I'm spreading it out, though, because at number 8, I've got Spider-Man Far From Home, and it's only this far down the list for me because of what happened above it. So I had to put one from the Tom Holland trilogy kind of low, and this was the one for me.
I agree. This is the worst of the Tom Holland trilogy, but I still think it's better than The Amazing Spider-Man 2. So sorry, Mark Webb and Andrew Garfield. Andrew Garfield, you're a great Spider-Man, but the movie was just a train wreck.
Okay, what do you have at number 8?
I thought what's next? Probably Spider-Man, the original, the 2002 Spider-Man.
Okay. I think you made a good case for that. Okay, at number 7, I've got The Amazing Spider-Man. That's the highest I go on this. I just put it there because I thought it was fine.
This is where I'm going to put Far From Home, I think. I would rather watch Doc Ock with Tobey Maguire than I would Mysterio with Tom Holland, unfortunately.
At number 6, I've got Spider-Man Homecoming, and I wrestled over this for a while, and again, it's because of what was happening above it in the list. I maybe could put this one at 5 or 4, but right now I've got it at number 6.
No, I think this one's going to be Spider-Man 2. If I haven't put that on my list yet, this is where Spider-Man 2 lives, right in the middle.
We're about to have a controversy. Okay, so at number 5, I have the original Sam Raimi, what's his name? Tobey Maguire Spider-Man.
I think I've gone through all of my original Spider-Mans, and I've gone through both of the Amazing Spider-Man. So number 5 on my list has got to be. This is probably where Far From Home lives. Yeah. Okay. If I haven't said it yet, I think this is where Far From Home lives.
I think our our age difference is what's accounting for the differences here, and I'll justify it in a minute. So at number 4, I have Into the Spider-Verse, and I've got both the animated ones in my top 4.
Both those animated ones obviously are my top 4. Now we're talking, the only ones that are left are the 2 animated ones and then the 2 other home trilogies. So I think this is where No Way Home lives for me. With like, even with all the ridiculous payoffs and the huge budget, this is like, the other movies were more grounded and a little better for Spider-Man for me.
Okay, I've got No Way Home at number 3, and that's my top out of the home trilogy. My favorite of the 3 is the most recent one.
I think Into the Spider-Verse is my number 3, like the first Miles Morales animated one.
Okay, so I'm interested in your top 2. At number 2, I have Across the Spider-Verse, which is the most recent animated movie. Fantastic. You can kind of, if you're listening along, you could probably put together that Josh and I are going to have very wildly different number 1s. Go ahead and give your number 2.
My number 2 is Across the Spider-Verse.
Okay, so we both have the same number 2 on our list.
Yep, but our number 1
is Homecoming your number 1?
Homecoming is my number 1. That's
wow.
Peak Spider-Man.
I've got it at number 6. Number 1 for me is Spider-Man 2. Let me tell you why.
Wow, it's Sam Raimi back in the day?
Yeah, it really is. It stands up well. It's a well-told story. It was kind of at the cutting edge of the technology that was available to it. Sam Raimi pulled all of his skills out of his bag of tricks from the back. There's lots of practical effects, but it was just... It was groundbreaking. It was good, well executed. It was important. It was kind of out by itself. It didn't have all these other movies around it to prop it up. It just stood alone as a great film. It was a great sequel. It was significant. It came at a time in my life when I really connected with it, and to me, it's my number 1 Spider-Man movie.
Homecoming, 2017 with Tom Holland. There's a scene where the Vulture, like in the third act, like collapses the building onto Peter in his old suit, and he's trapped under all this rubble, and he's trying to muster. There's this great transformation that happens in the scene, because at first he's just like, he wakes up and he's just terrified that he's trapped, and he tries tentatively to push and it's not moving, and just starts screaming for help, like, I'm down here, please come save me, the way that any teenager going through a panic attack would. And then you see him have to collect himself, like, nobody's coming, it's all on you, you've got to pick yourself up. And he starts pushing, like, all right, come on, Peter. And then he changes. Come on, Spider-Man. Because he knows Peter Parker's not taking care of this. This is Spider-Man that's doing this one. And like, just to see this great solo scene with just Tom Holland going through this emotionally traumatic event that every young person is going to have to, realizing that there's no one that's going to be able to help them. They have to like find it within themselves to overcome the adversity. And it was just so perfect. And it's everything I want Spider-Man to be.
Josh, that was amazing. You moved me. I'm going to go back and watch that scene again and watch for what you're talking about, because I didn't notice that. I didn't pick up on it, but it was so compelling the way you just retold it that I can't wait to watch it again. I also have a theory about this. I think, I'm going to have to go back and check and confirm, but I think I was the same age when Spider-Man 2 came out as the age you were when Homecoming came out.
What?
And I wonder if
you are not 13 years older than me. How old are you?
It's only like 7 or 8, so I guess it's okay.
Spider-Man 2 came out in 2004. Homecoming came out in 2017. You are not 13 years old.
Okay, so it wasn't 13 years. Okay, so much for that theory. Maybe it's a phase of 5 years. I don't know, but it connected with me at the right time.
Maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe Gen Xers like the Sam Raimis better than the Tom Hollands, and the millennials like the Tom Hollands better than the Sam Raimis.
Well, audience, I know we've gone longer than our usual time, and I think you realize that that's because Josh and I both enjoy this story, this Heroes Round, and connect with it, and it's an important part of our nerd culture, and we hope you enjoyed this talk with us. If you have something you want to say, something you want to add to the discussion, something we missed, something we couldn't think of, come join in the discussion. You can go on our Facebook page and comment there, or you can go on our subreddit and drop in a comment. We'd love to hear from you.
If you like what we do, share us with a friend. If you like us, maybe your friends will like us too. If you really want to show us some love, consider taking your phone out of your pocket and giving us a good review on the podcast player of your choice. We get such great visibility from that, and thank you to everyone who already has. And if you want me to yell at Ben about animation and movies just being good movies, doesn't matter where they came from now until the end of time, consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page.
And until next time, try to be a little less bad at magic.